They told you that school would prepare you for life, but the truth is that life was already happening while you were busy memorizing dates and formulas. The real curriculum was hidden, in the pauses between conversations, in the quiet ache of mistakes, in the moments no one graded you for. This is not the knowledge printed in textbooks. This is the wisdom passed through glances, failures, and the small invisible choices that bend the shape of your days. Here, there are no exams, only the unending test of how you live when no one's watching. They told you to set goals, make plans, chart your course, as if the world were a neatly drawn grid, and you only needed to follow the dotted lines. But what they never told you is that there are no dotted lines, only shifting landscapes, tides that pull without warning, and paths that vanish the moment you step onto them. A compass without a map is useless to some. They stare at the needle, panicked, waiting for directions that will never appear. But to others, the quiet wanderers, the ones who have learned to listen, it is liberation. The compass points not to a place, but to a truth. Forward is not a fixed location, it is simply the next step. Life without a map feels dangerous, because it strips away the illusion that anyone knows what they're doing. It reveals that most people are improvising, rehearsing confidence while hoping no one notices the cracks. You think the adults had it all figured out when you were younger, but now you know, they were just older children, holding their own compasses and pretending they had a map. When you stop demanding a map, you begin to trust your own internal landmarks. The quiet pull of curiosity, the discomfort that signals growth, the sudden knowing when something feels wrong. These are the signposts that can't be printed or handed to you. They are carved into you only by living. Of course, the danger of walking without a map is that you will get lost, and you will, more than once. You will take a job that drains you, move to a city that swallows you whole, fall in love with someone who is only a reflection of your own longing, and each time, the world will tilt and spin, and you will wish for a set of printed instructions. But in those moments, you will discover something far stranger. You were not meant to avoid getting lost. You were meant to learn what to do inside the lostness. A map gives you the illusion of certainty. A compass gives you the reality of direction. And when you understand the difference, you start to notice that the landscapes you once feared, the blank spaces on the page, are the ones where life actually happens. In school, they gave you timelines, syllabi, rubrics. Life gives you silence, wrong turns, and a horizon that keeps moving as you walk. The map is gone, and it was never yours to begin with. But the compass, that's inside you, and it is whispering even now. Sometimes it will point you somewhere strange, toward a conversation you don't want to have, a risk you don't feel ready for, a change that terrifies you. Sometimes it will point you inward, to the things you've been avoiding in yourself. You will resist it, argue with it, try to distract yourself with other people's maps, and yet, if you follow it, you will find that even the detours have a way of leading you to where you needed to be. One day, you will look back and see the path you took, a twisting, uneven trail that makes no sense on paper but somehow brought you here. You will realize that the value of the compass was never in where it pointed, but in the fact that it kept you moving, kept you learning, kept you alive to the possibility that the next step could change everything. You don't need the whole picture. You don't even need to know what's next. You just need to take the step in front of you, the one the compass is quietly urging you toward, and trust that the map will draw itself beneath your feet. They told you that money is the measure of work, that the value of what you do can be neatly captured in numbers, printed on a piece of paper or sent as digits to your bank account. They never told you about the value that slips between the paychecks, the kind you can't spend, but which shapes your life far more than any deposit ever could. The hours you spend teaching someone what you once had to learn alone. The night you stay awake talking a friend out of a decision they'll regret. The invisible skill of noticing when someone's voice wavers and asking if they're okay. No payslip will ever list these. Yet, they are the work that keeps the world from collapsing in on itself. We grow up thinking money is the ultimate proof of worth, because it is the easiest thing to count. It can be tallied, displayed, compared, but the things that matter most are difficult to measure. You can't quantify trust. You can't track the way a kind word reroutes someone's entire day. You can't store the satisfaction of solving a problem in the middle of chaos. Not in a bank, anyway. Some will tell you that if you can't put a price tag on it, it doesn't count. That is the logic of those who only know how to see the visible ledger, not the hidden one. But the hidden ledger is where your life is written. Every job will ask for your time, your energy, your focus. But some jobs will also ask for your patience, your empathy, your ability to remain calm while someone else is drowning. These are the tasks no one trains you for, yet they are the ones that make you irreplaceable, and strangely, they are also the ones most likely to be overlooked. There will be days when your paycheck feels insultingly small compared to the effort you've given. You will feel the weight of hours that stretched on forever, problems you solved that no one will remember, and you will wonder if it was worth it. But value is not always immediate. Sometimes, the work you do for no recognition plants seeds you'll never see bloom. Think of the mentor who guided you when you didn't even know you needed guidance. The friend who showed up with soup when you were sick. The colleague who covered your shift without complaint. None of them were paid for those moments. But you remember them, don't you? You remember because that kind of value doesn't fade. In school, they grade you on what you can prove. In life, the most important work is often invisible until much later. If it ever becomes visible at all, you are constantly creating value in ways you'll never be credited for: listening, comforting, making someone's burden a little lighter. These things ripple outward in ways you'll never be able to track. There will be times when you feel drained, unappreciated, unseen. That's when it's tempting to measure your worth only by what's on the payslip. But the truth is, you are not being paid for everything you do. You are being paid for what can be measured. The rest, the better, deeper, more human work, is what makes you truly wealthy, even if it never shows up in your account. And here's the strange twist. The value you create between paychecks is the value that lasts. Money will be spent, lost, forgotten, but the way you make people feel will outlive you. It will be passed down in gestures, in kindness repeated, without knowing their origin. One day you will leave a job. Your desk will be cleared, your password deleted, your name forgotten by the next quarter. But somewhere, someone will still be telling a story about the time you helped them when you didn't have to. That is value. That is your legacy. So yes, collect your paycheck, spend it well, but don't mistake it for the full measure of your worth. The real currency is in the moments no one writes down, the work no one notices except the person whose day you quietly changed. That is the value that slips between the paychecks, the kind no economy can control. Most people think they are good listeners because they stay quiet while someone else talks. But silence is not the same as listening. Silence can be a disguise, a way to wait for your turn to speak, to load your reply like an arrow in a bow while the other person's words pass by, unabsorbed. School taught you to answer questions, not to receive them. It rewarded quick responses, confident opinions, the ability to have something ready the moment the teacher called your name. But life's real conversations don't work that way. They aren't recitations, they are living exchanges, and in them, the real art is not in speaking, it is in truly hearing. Listening without waiting to speak is harder than it sounds, because it asks you to give up control. It means entering a moment without the safety net of rehearsed thoughts. It means allowing another person's words to land, change shape in your mind, and perhaps even change you. And change is uncomfortable. When you wait to speak, you're not actually present. You're running an internal commentary. How does this relate to me? What should I say next? How do I sound? But when you listen without that internal noise, something shifts. You stop scanning for entry points into the conversation and start inhabiting the space between someone else's words. That space is where understanding lives. It is in that quiet reception where people reveal the things they don't even know they're saying, the hesitations, the repeated phrases, the sudden change in tone. A person might tell you they're fine, but if you're truly listening, you'll hear the way fine sits heavy in their mouth, how it doesn't match the rest of the sentence, and that's where the truth hides. The temptation to jump in comes from fear. Fear of silence, fear of not being interesting enough, fear of being forgotten if you don't keep making noise. But silence, when you're listening, is not absence, it's presence. It's the proof that you care enough to hold the moment without rushing it forward. Some people will fill the silence for you. Others will notice it and go deeper, saying the thing they weren't sure they could share. You'll be amazed at how much people will reveal when they feel they are truly heard, not just endured. This kind of listening also requires setting aside your agenda. Sometimes you will hear something you disagree with. Sometimes you will hear pain that makes you want to fix it. Sometimes you will hear a story that collides with your own memories. But the moment you pull the focus back to yourself, with advice, with correction, with "that reminds me of when," you shift the center of gravity away from them, and the conversation stops being about understanding. In school, the point of listening was to answer. In life, the point of listening is to witness, that doesn't mean you can't respond. It means your response should be shaped by what you have actually heard, not by what you were preparing to say all along. There will be moments when listening without waiting to speak feels impossible, when the words you want to say are burning inside you, when you think you've already heard this story before, when you believe you know exactly where the conversation is going, but you don't know. People are never as predictable as you think. If you can hold back your response, even for a few seconds, you might hear the thing that changes your understanding entirely. Listening in this way is a form of generosity. It tells the other person, right now, you are more important than my need to be heard, and in a world full of noise, that is rare. You may find that some people will notice the difference. They will seek you out, not because you give the best advice, but because they feel lighter after talking to you. They will tell you things they don't tell anyone else, not because you are special in some mysterious way, but because you made the choice, over and over, to listen without rushing in. And here's the strange truth. When you listen without waiting to speak, the words you eventually do say carry more weight. They are no longer just fillers to keep the conversation moving. They are shaped by the fullness of what you have received, and people can feel that difference. One day, someone will tell you a story they've never told before, and you'll realize that the greatest gift you gave them was not your opinion, not your advice, not even your understanding, but the space to speak without being interrupted by your own need to speak back. That is listening. That is presence. That is the kind of wisdom they never taught you in school, but which will change every relationship you have. School taught you to wait, but not to be patient. You waited for bells to ring, for assignments to be returned, for the clock to finally let you go home. But that wasn't patience. That was counting down. Patience is something else entirely. It isn't about the clock at all. It's about learning to stand inside the present moment, without demanding that it move faster. True patience feels like swimming in deep water without kicking. You float, you breathe, you let the current carry you, even when you don't know exactly where it's taking you. It is not the absence of desire, it is the refusal to let desire become desperation. Most people mistake urgency for importance. They think that the faster something happens, the more it matters. But the truth is, the things worth keeping, trust, love, mastery, wisdom, grow on their own clocks. You cannot shout them into ripeness. You cannot make the tree bloom by pulling on its branches. In a world addicted to speed, patience feels like rebellion. We are told that success belongs to those who hustle hardest, who act now, who strike before the moment passes. And sometimes that's true, but other times, the times that matter most, the thing you need to do is wait. Wait without losing faith. Wait without filling the silence with frantic motion. The hardest part is that patience doesn't feel like progress. When you're patient, nothing seems to be happening. You can't see the roots growing. You can't see the slow rearrangement of the future. It's only later, when you look back, that you realize everything was happening while you were standing still. Patience is not passive. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing the small, steady work that doesn't give you immediate results. The conversations that take years to bear fruit. The skills that sharpen over decades. The relationships that deepen because you didn't demand they prove themselves right away. You will meet people who quit too soon. They will walk away from something that was just about to turn in their favor, simply because they couldn't stand the quiet before the breakthrough, and you will understand why. Because waiting feels endless, and certainty is rare. But patience is the art of trusting what you cannot yet see. Sometimes, you will have to be patient with people. They will fail you, misunderstand you, disappoint you. They will grow at their own maddening pace, and you will want to pull them forward. But patience means giving them space to arrive in their own time, just as someone once gave you that space, whether you realized it or not. Other times, you will have to be patient with yourself. This is the most difficult kind. You will want to skip the awkward stages of learning, the uncomfortable parts of healing, the slow climb out of your own mistakes. You will want to be fixed now, better now, successful now. But patience with yourself is what keeps you from collapsing under the weight of your own expectations. In school, the waiting was always for something external, the end of class, the next grade, the next year. In life, the waiting is often for yourself to catch up to who you are becoming, and there is no bell to tell you when that happens. The truth is, patience outlives time because it isn't measured by hours or days. It is measured by endurance, by the willingness to remain in motionless faith. You can lose hours, you can lose years, but patience remains as long as you choose not to break under the strain of the unfinished. One day, something you've been waiting for will arrive. Not with a trumpet blast, not with fireworks, but quietly, like it had been there all along, just needing you to be ready, and you will realize that the waiting was never empty. It was shaping you. It was making you into the person who could meet that moment without fear, without haste, without breaking it by rushing it. Patience is the unseen bridge between where you are and where you're meant to be, and though you can't measure its progress on a clock, it will carry you farther than any rush ever could. School celebrated big moments. The final exam, the graduation, the gold star. They told you that achievement comes in bursts, in leaps, in sudden victories, but life, you've learned, is built in increments, so small they're almost invisible. And those small steps, the ones no one applauds, are the ones that quietly move mountains. It's tempting to wait for the breakthrough, the job offer that changes everything, the relationship that makes the rest of your life make sense, the single moment when your dream becomes real. But waiting for a leap is dangerous, because it blinds you to the power of steady, ordinary motion. Small steps are easy to dismiss. They feel like nothing in the moment. The extra page you read before bed, the 10 minutes of practice when you're tired, the one uncomfortable conversation you finally decide to have. But each one is a stone placed under your feet, and stones become paths, and paths can lead you anywhere. The mountain, whatever yours is, will never move all at once. No single act will flatten it, but small steps change your position against it, and one day you look up and realize the peak is no longer above you, but behind you. The danger is that small steps don't feel urgent. They don't give you the rush of accomplishment that big wins do. They're quiet, almost forgettable, and that's why so many people quit before they see the result. They mistake slow progress for no progress. But think about water against stone. A single drop does nothing, but millions of drops, over years, carve valleys. They shape landscapes. They move what should be unmovable. That's what your small steps are doing, even when you can't see the change yet. Some days your step will be so small you'll think it's not worth taking. You'll want to wait until you have the energy for a bigger leap, but momentum doesn't care about size. A small step keeps the motion alive. It stops the weight of inaction from settling over you like cement. Small steps also protect you from fear. When the goal is too big, it's easy to freeze, to convince yourself you're not ready. But when you shrink the task into something manageable, you take away fear's favorite weapon, the illusion that you must be extraordinary before you begin. In school, the finish lines were obvious. You knew when you had passed or failed. In life, the finish lines are blurry, and often they don't exist at all. That's why small steps matter even more. They give you something you can finish every day, even if it's just moving 1 inch closer. Sometimes those steps will be backward. You'll make mistakes, undo your own work, lose ground you thought you had secured. But the act of stepping, again and again, builds something inside you that no leap ever could: endurance. And endurance will carry you farther than talent or luck ever will. Small steps are not glamorous. They don't get headlines, but they are honest. They are proof that you are willing to show up for your life, not just for its victories. And showing up is the most underestimated form of power you have. One day, someone will call you lucky. They'll see you standing on the other side of your mountain and assume you must have found a shortcut. They won't see the mornings you woke up and did the work when no one was watching, the nights you kept going when it would have been easier to stop. They won't see the trail of small steps that got you here, but you'll know. And when you face your next mountain, you won't be intimidated, because you'll have learned that the secret isn't to move it all at once. It's to keep moving yourself, one deliberate step at a time, until the mountain moves without you realizing it. Small steps don't just move mountains, they change you. They teach you that progress is not a single event, but a lifelong habit. And once you learn that, there is no mountain too high, no valley too deep, only the next step. School taught you that mistakes are something to avoid. Correct, erase, a red pen, circling what you got wrong, a lower grade to remind you of your failure. The unspoken rule was that mistakes put you behind, that they were detours away from where you were supposed to be. But life doesn't work like that. In life, mistakes are not detours, they are the road itself. Every wrong turn teaches you something the right turn never could. Every misstep forces you to notice the ground beneath you. And if you pay attention, your mistakes start to connect behind you like planks in a bridge, carrying you to places you couldn't have reached any other way. The truth is, you can't build a bridge out of successes alone. Success is smooth and easy to stand on, but it doesn't teach you how to fix the cracks. Mistakes teach you to notice the cracks before they break. They teach you to rebuild with stronger materials, to carry the lessons forward. When you look back, you'll see that some of the most important things you know didn't come from getting it right. They came from feeling the sting of getting it wrong, and choosing not to stop there. That's the difference between a mistake that buries you and a mistake that builds you. You will make decisions you regret. You will trust people who betray you. You will speak when you should have stayed silent, and stay silent when you should have spoken. And each time, you will be tempted to hide the evidence, to pretend it never happened. But mistakes you hide rot in the dark. Mistakes you face become lumber you can use. The bridge you build from mistakes is different from the one you imagined in your youth. It's not straight. It doesn't rise cleanly toward the horizon. It twists, dips, sways under the wind. But it holds, because every plank was earned through something you survived. Some people spend their whole lives on the shore, too afraid to take a step because they can't bear the thought of a wrong one. They stay where it's safe, watching others cross, wondering why their own life feels so still. They don't realize that the only way across is to risk falling, and to keep building as you go. Mistakes also connect you to others. When you share them honestly, you give people permission to lay down their own planks. They see that they are not alone in their wrong turns, that the shame they carry is not unique, and together you build something wider, stronger, a bridge that doesn't just carry you, but carries everyone who walks it after you. In school, you learn to aim for the perfect score, the flawless answer. But perfection is a brittle thing. It doesn't bend under weight. It doesn't survive storms. Mistakes, on the other hand, are flexible. They teach you how to bend without breaking, how to adapt when the road ahead changes. There will be mistakes you think you'll never recover from. And yet, you will. You'll carry the scar. Yes. But the scar is proof you lived, not proof you failed. The bridge needs its scars. Without them, it wouldn't hold. One day, you'll find yourself on the far side of a canyon you didn't think you could cross. You'll turn around and see the bridge behind you. Uneven, patched, imperfect. And you'll realize it's the most beautiful thing you've ever built. Because it's made of every risk you took, every lesson you learned the hard way, every fall you refused to let be the end. The irony is that if you had tried to build it perfectly from the start, it would have collapsed under the first real weight. But because it was built plank by plank, mistake by mistake, it's stronger than you ever imagined. So don't fear mistakes. Fear standing still on the shore, letting the river between you and your future grow wider, while you wait for a perfect plan that will never come. Step onto the first plank, even if it wobbles, and keep building, even when the wind shakes the bridge beneath you. One day, you'll walk across without fear, and you'll know that it was the mistakes that made it possible. You were taught to trust what you see. Charts, diagrams, photographs, proof. School trained you to believe that vision was truth, that what entered your eyes was the same as what existed in the world. But your eyes are not windows. They are filters. They do not simply take in reality. They translate it, bend it, and sometimes hide it entirely. Seeing the world without your eyes begins with admitting that your vision is not the final authority. It's just one perspective, a useful one, but not the only one. There are entire dimensions of reality you can't see at all, yet they shape every part of your life. Think about sound. Close your eyes, and suddenly the room becomes bigger. You hear the hum of the fridge, the distant rhythm of traffic, the almost silent creak of the floor settling. You notice the difference between the sharpness of metal against wood and the softness of fabric against skin. You begin to map space with echoes. Or think about touch. The temperature of the air against your skin, the weight of your own body in the chair, the slight resistance of a page turning in your hand. Without sight, these things are no longer background noise. They become landmarks in the territory of the moment. There are people who have never seen a sunrise, yet they can describe its arrival better than those who watch it every morning. They feel the shift in the air, hear the birds rearranging their songs, notice how the ground itself seems to stretch toward the light. They know the sunrise without needing to see it. When you strip away your dependence on vision, the world changes shape. Time slows, details multiply. The things you overlooked before become impossible to ignore, and you begin to understand how much of your life has been edited by your eyes. The problem with sight is that it's impatient. It takes in the big picture first, and often ignores the quiet details. Hearing, touch, smell. These senses are slower, more deliberate. They pull you into the fine print of existence, where the richness is hidden. To see the world without your eyes is also to see beyond the surface of people. Eyes tell you someone is smiling, but their voice tells you if it's real. Their hands tell you if they're nervous. Their silences tell you if they're carrying something they can't speak of yet. We think vision makes us objective, but sight is just as biased as thought. It's shaped by what you expect to see, what you've been told to notice, what you want to believe. Seeing without your eyes forces you to step outside that bias. It makes you listen to what isn't being said, feel what isn't being shown, understand what isn't being explained. In school, they gave you pictures and asked you to describe them, but life often gives you only fragments, a tone of voice, a shift in posture, a pause between words, and asks you to read the whole story. Those who can only see with their eyes will miss it entirely. There will be times when the lights go out, literally or metaphorically, and you'll have to navigate without sight. And when that happens, you'll realize that you've been practicing for it every time you've chosen to slow down and engage your other senses. Seeing the world without your eyes isn't about closing them forever. It's about knowing that vision is just one way of being present. It's about noticing that the most important truths often live in the spaces your eyes can't reach. One day, you'll be with someone you love, and the world around you will blur, not because your eyes fail, but because the feeling in the moment is too big to be captured by sight. You'll feel the weight of their presence, hear the rhythm of their breathing, know without seeing that they are there, fully with you, and you'll realize that you've seen more in that moment than your eyes have ever shown you. To see without your eyes is to live in a fuller reality, one where you stop mistaking visibility for truth, where you stop assuming that what you notice is all that exists. It is the art of letting the world reveal itself through every sense you have, and even through the ones you can't name. Power is not always taken from you. More often, it is given away, quietly, unconsciously, in moments so small, you don't even realize the exchange has happened. You hand it over in the way you let someone else's opinion decide your worth, in the way you hesitate to speak because you're afraid of being wrong, in the way you shrink yourself to make someone else more comfortable. School taught you that authority came from the top down. Teachers, principals, administrators. You learned to look upward for permission. But in life, most of the power you lose does not come from authority figures. It slips through your fingers because you believe you don't have a right to hold it in the first place. It begins with agreement, agreeing to be silent when something feels wrong, agreeing to take the blame to keep the peace, agreeing to act smaller than you are, so you won't be seen as a threat. These agreements feel harmless in the moment. They feel like kindness or diplomacy or maturity, but over time they train you to doubt your own strength. Every time you apologize for existing, you make yourself lighter in someone else's hands. Every time you ask for validation before taking action, you let someone else become the gatekeeper of your life. And every time you hide your real thoughts because you're afraid of disapproval, you let someone else decide what parts of you are acceptable. The power you give away without knowing is rarely demanded of you outright. No one says, "Give me your confidence. Give me your voice." Instead, it's offered in small gestures, in the way you accept an unfair rule without question, in the way you tolerate disrespect, because you've convinced yourself it's not worth the fight. The danger is that power, once given away, is difficult to reclaim. Not because it's truly gone, but because you start to forget you ever had it. You begin to see yourself through the eyes of those you've been deferring to, and their view of you is never as whole as your own. This isn't about becoming combative or refusing compromise. It's about noticing the difference between choosing to yield and feeling you have no choice but to yield. It's about understanding that boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They are the framework that keeps your power inside. Sometimes you will give away your power in the name of love. You will make yourself smaller to keep a relationship from breaking. You will swallow your needs to avoid being too much. But love built on the absence of your power is not love at all. It's dependency disguised as connection. Other times, you will give away your power in the name of survival. You will keep your head down at a job, because speaking up might cost you your income, and sometimes that will be the necessary choice. But even then, you can hold on to your inner power, the quiet knowing of your own worth, the private truth that you are more than the role you've been forced into. In school, you learn to follow rules. In life, you learn that not all rules are worth following, and that some were never meant for you in the first place. The challenge is knowing when breaking them is an act of recklessness, and when it is the only way to reclaim yourself. The first step to holding on to your power is noticing the leak. Catch yourself in the moment you hesitate to say what you mean. Catch yourself when you downplay an achievement, so others won't feel threatened. Catch yourself when you dismiss your own instincts, because they weren't confirmed by someone else. When you stop giving away your power without knowing, you begin to live differently. You stop walking into rooms wondering if you belong, because you carry the quiet certainty that your presence is already your proof. You stop letting the wrong people define you, because you've taken back the pen. One day, you will look back at all the places you handed yourself over, and realize you didn't lose those parts of you, you just set them aside for a while, and you'll understand that your power was never truly gone. It was waiting for you to stop asking permission to pick it up again. They tell you to stand up for yourself, to fight for what's right, to never back down, but what they don't tell you is that if you fight every battle, you will have no strength left for the ones that actually matter. Choosing your battles is not about cowardice. It is about strategy, survival, and knowing the difference between a passing storm and a war worth waging. School rewarded you for being right, for proving your point, for winning the debate. In life, being right can still leave you defeated, if the cost of proving it is too high. Some arguments will steal your peace for days, even if you win. Some victories will cost you relationships, opportunities, or parts of yourself you can't get back. The quiet art of choosing battles begins with asking yourself, will this matter a year from now? Most of the time, the honest answer is no. The comment that stings today will be forgotten. The person cutting you off in traffic will not shape the course of your life. But other times, the answer is yes, and when it's yes, you fight with everything you have. The key is not to confuse urgency with importance. Urgency demands your immediate attention. Importance shapes the long-term direction of your life. The world will try to make everything urgent, because urgency forces reaction, but urgency is often just noise in disguise. Choosing your battles is also about energy. You have a finite supply of it, no matter how determined you are. Spend it all on small skirmishes, and you'll have nothing left for the moments when you truly need your voice, your focus, your courage. Sometimes, the right choice is to walk away, not because you've given up, but because you've recognized that not every hill is worth dying on. Walking away can be an act of strength, a way of refusing to let someone else set the terms of your life. It's not surrender, it's preservation. But there will be moments when silence is dangerous, when the cost of not fighting is higher than the cost of standing your ground, when injustice grows stronger in the shadow of your inaction. In those moments, you cannot be passive. You cannot wait for someone else to fight for you. The battle becomes yours, and your choice is whether to meet it with preparation or to let it take you by surprise. The difficulty is that the line between those two kinds of moments is not always clear. You will get it wrong sometimes. You will waste your energy on something trivial and miss something vital. But each mistake sharpens your sense of proportion. Each misstep teaches you the subtle difference between battles that drain you and battles that define you. In school, there were clear rules. You knew who the authority was. You knew what the fight was about. In life, the lines are blurry. The enemy is not always a person. Sometimes it's your own ego, your own pride, your own unwillingness to let go of being right. And those battles are often the hardest to win. To master the quiet art of choosing battles, you must also learn the quiet art of letting go of the need to win every argument, letting go of the illusion that you can fix everyone else's thinking, letting go of the belief that someone has to lose in order for you to live fully. There will be times when walking away feels unsatisfying, when you replay the conversation in your head, imagining all the things you could have said, but satisfaction is not the same as peace. And peace is what you protect when you refuse to throw yourself into every fight. One day you will face a battle you didn't choose, one that arrives without warning, that forces you to step into the arena whether you feel ready or not. And when that happens, the energy you saved, the focus you preserved, the discipline you practiced will be the weapons you need. You will be able to fight fully, not because you never fight, but because you fight only when it matters most. Choosing your battles is not about avoiding conflict. It's about building a life that isn't ruled by it. And once you learn that, you stop mistaking every spark for a fire, every disagreement for a war. You start to live with more clarity, more strength, and more room to breathe. Trust is a currency more valuable than money, yet far easier to lose. You can't print it. You can't demand it. You can only earn it. Slowly, through 1,000 consistent acts. And like any currency, once spent recklessly, it's almost impossible to recover in full. School taught you about transactions, grades for work, praise for performance, rewards for following the rules. But trust doesn't work that way. You can't trade for it. You can't force someone to give it to you. simply because you've done what they asked. Trust is voluntary. It is always given, never taken. You earn trust in the moments no one notices. Showing up when you said you would, keeping a promise even when it's inconvenient, holding a secret that isn't yours to share. Each of these is a deposit into an invisible account. You may not see the balance growing, but it's there. And one day you will need to make a withdrawal, in a crisis, in a moment of doubt, in a time when your word is all you have. The value of trust is clearest when it's gone. Lose it, and you'll find yourself speaking twice as loudly to be heard, working twice as hard to be believed, making promises that are met with quiet suspicion. Without trust, even the truth sounds like a lie. The danger is that trust is not lost in one dramatic collapse. More often, it leaks away in small, almost invisible breaches. The missed deadline you said wouldn't happen, the small lie you told to avoid discomfort, the careless way you spoke about someone when they weren't there. Each one is a crack in the foundation, and a foundation doesn't need to shatter to fail. It only needs enough cracks. Trust also flows both ways. You can't expect it without giving it. That means believing in someone before they've given you every reason to, extending them the benefit of the doubt, allowing them room to be human without treating every misstep as betrayal. Trust grows in the space between your expectations and their imperfections. In school, trust was built into the structure. You trusted the teacher to grade you fairly, the system to promote you when you met its standards. In life, the structure is gone. Trust must be built person by person, moment by moment, and it's far more fragile here. The truth is, trust requires risk. To trust someone is to hand them something they could break, and yet, without that risk, no relationship, personal or professional, can last. The people who never trust are the loneliest, not because others have failed them, but because they've walled themselves off from the possibility of being known. Sometimes you will give trust, and it will be broken. You will feel the sharpness of betrayal, the sting of realizing that the account you thought was full is empty, and it will be tempting to close yourself off entirely, to decide that trust is a luxury you can't afford. But trust is not given because it is safe. It is given because it is necessary. When you keep your word over and over, even in small things, people begin to lean on you without thinking. They don't check if you'll follow through. They know you will, and that knowing is priceless. It changes how they see you, how they speak to you, how they stand beside you. One day, you may find yourself in a situation where everything else is uncertain, where plans fail, resources vanish, and the only thing holding a group together is whether they believe each other. In that moment, trust becomes the only currency that matters, and if you've earned it, you will see how rich you truly are. The irony is that trust is most valuable when it is least visible. It is not the loud promises, but the quiet consistencies that build it. It's not the grand gestures, but the small, almost forgettable acts of reliability. Those are the coins in the currency of trust. And the more you collect, the stronger your connections, your opportunities, and your own sense of self become. In school, the rules were written down. You knew when to raise your hand, where to sit, what counted as passing and failing. If you broke a rule, someone told you, and often told you loudly. Life outside those walls is nothing like that. Out here the rules are rarely written. They are invisible, shifting, and sometimes contradictory. And the most important ones are the ones no one will ever tell you outright. This is the rulebook no one hands you. The unspoken laws that govern relationships, work, trust, and survival. You only learn them by stumbling into them, often by breaking them without knowing they existed. You learn that being right is not the same as being respected, that timing matters as much as truth, that some doors will not open no matter how hard you knock, unless someone who already has the key chooses to let you in. You learn that favors are a form of currency, that helping someone quietly, without asking for credit, can be worth more than 100 loud achievements, that sometimes the people you expect to help you will not, and the ones you barely noticed will step forward when it matters most. You learn that how you leave something, a job, a friendship, a city, shapes how you are remembered more than how you began it. That burning a bridge might feel like justice in the moment, but often costs you paths you didn't yet know you would need. You learn that perception is reality for most people, that it's not enough to be capable. You have to be seen as capable, that people will believe the story that is told the most often, whether it's true or not. And you learn that sometimes, the wisest move is not to fight every false story, but to live in a way that makes them impossible to sustain. In school, the rules were enforced equally, at least in theory. In life, they bend for some and harden for others, and no one will tell you which group you're in until you've already tested the wrong boundary. You learn that speaking up at the wrong time can close more doors than it opens, but that silence at the wrong time can lock them forever. That the courage to break a rule must be matched by the wisdom to know when the cost is worth paying. You learn that not every rule is real. Some exist only to keep you in line, to keep you predictable, to make life easier for those who benefit from your obedience. And you learn that breaking those rules, deliberately, strategically, can open worlds you didn't know you were allowed to enter. But the most difficult thing about the unwritten rulebook is that it is different for everyone. What works in one circle will ruin you in another. What earns you loyalty in one place will make you an outsider somewhere else. There is no universal edition. You write your own copy as you go, in the margins of your mistakes and the notes from your victories. Sometimes you will break a rule without knowing, and someone will never look at you the same way again. You will replay the moment, searching for the line you crossed, and find nothing obvious. That's the nature of invisible rules. You can't follow what you can't see, and yet, slowly, you start to recognize the patterns. The irony is that once you begin to understand the unwritten rules, they stop controlling you. You stop walking into situations blind. You start choosing which rules to follow and which to bend, based not on fear, but on what serves your integrity and your future. One day, you will find yourself in a room where someone is about to make the mistake you once made. You'll see it coming before it happens, and you'll realize that you've learned the rule, not because someone told you, but because you paid the cost of breaking it. This is the education you can't get in a classroom, the kind that comes only from living, failing, adjusting, and trying again. No one hands you the rulebook. You write it in real time, in your own handwriting, page by page. Life will hand you storms you didn't see coming. Some arrive like distant thunder, giving you time to prepare. Others fall from a clear sky, splitting the air before you can take cover. School prepared you for deadlines, for predictable challenges, for problems with neat solutions, but it did not prepare you for the kind of storms that don't pass on a schedule, the ones that take root inside you, the ones you must carry for months or years without capsizing. Carrying a storm without sinking is not about ignoring it. Pretending it isn't there only makes the water rise faster. It's about learning to balance your weight against it, to adjust your sails, to shift your center so the wind doesn't pull you under. The first lesson is this: not all storms can be outrun. Some will follow you no matter how far you go. They are tied to you through grief, through loss, through a truth you cannot unlearn. These are the storms you carry, not the ones you escape. And carrying them means accepting that you can live with heaviness without letting it consume you. The second lesson is that storms distort your vision. They make the horizon look farther away than it is. They make the smallest waves feel like walls. If you believe the storm's illusion, you'll stop moving entirely. But if you remember that even the fiercest weather shifts eventually, you keep rowing, even if it's only a few strokes at a time. Carrying storms also means deciding what to throw overboard. You cannot keep everything. The extra weight, grudges, unnecessary obligations, the endless need to explain yourself to people who will never understand, will sink you faster than the storm itself. Survival demands choosing what matters most and letting the rest go, even if letting go feels like loss. Some storms are external, job loss, illness, betrayal. Others are internal, self-doubt, fear, the quiet ache of regret. The internal storms are harder to carry because no one else can see them. They won't send help if they don't know you're drowning. That's why it matters to speak, to let someone see the dark water rising in you, not so they can carry it for you. They can't, but so they can remind you that you are still above the surface. In school, the problems were solved by showing your work. Out here, some problems have no solution at all, only endurance, and endurance is built by weathering smaller storms, learning the rhythms of wind and wave, so that when the larger one comes, you already know how to steady yourself. There will be times when you feel certain the storm will break you. You will be tired of holding on, tired of pretending you're fine, tired of being the one who can handle it. And in those moments, the temptation to let go will be strongest. But letting go is not the same as rest. Rest happens in the eye of the storm, a small temporary stillness you can find if you allow yourself to pause without abandoning the ship. The truth is, some storms change you permanently. They take parts of you that you will never get back. They carve you into someone new, but carved things can be beautiful. They can be stronger, more deliberate, more open to light. One day, the storm you've been carrying will ease. Maybe it will fade so slowly you won't notice at first. Maybe it will break all at once, leaving you stunned by the sudden quiet. And in that quiet, you will realize you didn't survive because the storm was small. You survived because you learned how to hold it without letting it take you under. The secret to carrying storms without sinking is not to fight the water, but to move with it. Not to deny the wind, but to lean into it just enough to stay upright. It is the knowledge that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the decision to keep steering, even when the map is gone and the sky is black. A mirror is supposed to reflect only what's there, a simple, impartial surface that bounces your image back at you. But the truth is, no mirror shows you only yourself. It shows the way you've been told to see yourself. It shows the weight of years, the influence of other people's voices, the unspoken comparisons you carry like invisible bruises. In school, mirrors were literal. Bathroom walls where you fixed your hair before class, shiny glass in dance studios that reminded you to correct your posture. But outside those walls, the mirrors you encounter are not always made of glass. Sometimes they are people. Sometimes they are moments. Sometimes they are entire situations that reveal more about you than you were ready to see. The most honest mirrors are rarely the ones you seek out. A friend tells you a truth you didn't want to hear. A child imitates your tone of voice, and you suddenly understand how you sound when you're impatient. A stranger reacts to your presence in a way that reflects the energy you didn't realize you were carrying. These are the mirrors that don't lie, because they have nothing to gain from flattering you. There are also warped mirrors, the ones that show you as smaller, uglier, less capable than you are. These can be people who see you only through the lens of their own limitations or environments that reward you for shrinking yourself. Spend too much time in front of those mirrors, and you start to believe their version of you is the truth. Then there are the magnifying mirrors, the ones that exaggerate your flaws until they're all you can see. They live in the perfectionism that tells you you're never enough, in the constant self-comparison that makes every achievement feel like an accident. These mirrors don't just distort your image, they distort your sense of reality. But the most dangerous mirror is the one you avoid entirely. The truths you refuse to look at have a way of shaping your life anyway. Ignoring them doesn't erase them. It just means they work in the shadows, guiding your choices without your awareness. The mirror that shows more than you is not always kind, but it is always instructive. It teaches you that self-awareness is not a single revelation but an ongoing practice. Every time you see yourself reflected, in glass, in someone's eyes, in the consequences of your actions, you are being offered information, and you get to choose whether to use it to grow or to hide. In school, your reflection didn't matter much beyond appearance. In life, it's everything. How you see yourself determines the risks you take, the people you let close, the limits you set or erase. But the irony is that you can't see yourself clearly without help. You need mirrors, and not all of them will be flattering. There will be moments when the reflection hurts, when you see the ways you've failed, the patterns you've repeated, the harm you've caused without meaning to, and in those moments, you will be tempted to smash the mirror, to reject the image entirely. But destruction doesn't change the truth. It just leaves you in the dark. The courage is in standing there, looking fully, and deciding what to do with what you see. Maybe you soften the edges, maybe you strengthen the frame, maybe you realize that the version you've been chasing is not actually yours, but one handed to you by someone else's expectations. One day, you will catch an unguarded reflection, in a window, in a photograph, in the way someone looks at you with quiet recognition, and you will see not just your face, but your history, your resilience, your contradictions. You will see that you are more than the narrow image you've been carrying. The mirror that shows more than you is the one that refuses to let you live only in the version of yourself you've curated. It shows you the parts you've ignored, the parts you've denied, and the parts you've been underestimating. And if you can face that reflection without flinching, you will discover something rare, a self-image that isn't built on illusion, but on truth. Some words never make it past your lips, yet they linger in the air between you and someone else, heavy as rain clouds that never break. You carry them in your chest, in your jaw, in the tightness of your shoulders, and whether they are words of love you never spoke or truths you never dared to say, they change you. In school, unspoken words were usually safe, answers you kept to yourself to avoid being wrong, thoughts you didn't share because the class had already moved on. But in life, the cost of silence can be much higher. A word withheld at the right moment can mean the loss of a relationship, the deepening of a misunderstanding, the missed chance to stop harm before it spreads. Unspoken words are not neutral. They don't disappear just because you didn't say them. They ferment. They grow sharper, heavier, more tangled over time. The longer they remain unsaid, the more they shape the space between people, often in ways neither side fully understands. Sometimes, silence is protection. You keep the peace by holding back anger. You shield someone's feelings by not telling them a truth that would cut deep. And sometimes, that's the right choice. But it is never without consequence, because while the other person is spared the sting of your words, you are left carrying their full weight. There are also the unspoken words of love and appreciation. The compliments you thought but never voiced. The gratitude you assumed was obvious. You tell yourself you'll say it later, when the moment is right. But later is a fragile thing, and people are not guaranteed to be here when you finally decide to speak. The weight of unspoken words often feels like a private burden, but it leaks into your actions. A resentment you've never voiced shows up in your tone. An affection you've never declared makes you overcompensate in small, awkward ways. You think you're hiding it, but the truth of what you feel finds ways to reveal itself, with or without your consent. In school, you were taught that communication was about speaking clearly, writing well, delivering your thoughts in complete sentences. Life teaches you that communication is also about the courage to say what you'd rather avoid, and the wisdom to know when not to. The hardest unspoken words are the ones that could change everything. The apology that could mend a fracture, the confession that could open a door, the boundary that could protect you from being hurt again. These are the words that sit just behind your teeth, pressing forward, and yet you swallow them, because speaking them would mean stepping into uncertainty. Silence can be a sanctuary, but it can also be a prison. When you keep too much inside, you begin to live in a smaller version of yourself. You tiptoe through conversations, afraid of what might spill out if you fully inhabit your voice, and slowly you become fluent in avoidance. But the moment you release a long-held word, you feel the shift immediately. Sometimes it lands like a stone, heavy, irreversible. Sometimes it lands like a feather, lighter than you feared, freeing you in ways you didn't expect. Either way, it no longer has the power to weigh you down in secret. One day, you may think back to all the words you never said, to the people who are gone now, to the chances you didn't take, to the truths you never offered, and you will feel their absence like ghosts in the room. That's when you'll understand that silence is not just the absence of sound, it is the presence of all the things you never allowed to exist in the open. The weight of unspoken words will always be with you. The question is whether you choose to carry it forever, or whether you find the courage to speak, not recklessly, not endlessly, but truthfully, because once certain words are freed, they stop haunting you, and sometimes they even save you. We are taught to measure effort by its immediate reward, to expect a return for every investment, a visible result for every action. School reinforced it with grades, trophies, and quick feedback, but life asks for something harder, to give your time, your energy, your care, to something you may never benefit from personally, to plant trees you'll never sit under. It is easy to work for yourself, to build what you can enjoy, to create comfort that directly feeds your own life. It is much harder to do the work whose fruits will be eaten by people you'll never meet, and yet, this is the work that changes the shape of the world. Planting trees you'll never sit under can be literal, restoring a forest, building a bridge, creating a system that outlives you. But it can also be intangible, teaching a skill that will carry someone far beyond your reach, shaping a culture that protects people long after your influence is gone, speaking a truth that plants itself in someone else's mind and grows there for years. The difficulty is that you won't get to see the full result. You may not get thanked, you may never know if your effort mattered at all, and in a world obsessed with visibility and recognition, that can feel like failure, but it isn't. It is an act of quiet defiance against the belief that worth is measured only by what you get back. There is a humility in this kind of work, in accepting that you are not the center of the story, that your role might be to begin something you will not finish. It requires faith, not in a guarantee, but in the possibility that something you start will keep growing long after you've gone. Some will see this as wasted effort. They will ask, why do something if you won't benefit from it? But those who ask have not yet learned the strange satisfaction of seeing something thrive without needing to own it. They have not felt the quiet pride of leaving the soil richer than they found it. In school, projects had deadlines, and you knew exactly when they ended. In life, the most meaningful projects often have no end date. They simply continue, passed from one set of hands to another. And if you've done your work well, the people who carry it forward may never even know your name. Planting trees you'll never sit under teaches you to let go of control. Once the seed is in the ground, it grows in its own time, in its own way. You can nurture it, protect it, but you cannot force it to bloom on your schedule. You learn to trust the process, to keep working, even when you can't see the results. There will be times when you are tempted to stop, when you wonder if your effort matters, if the seed is even alive beneath the soil. That's when you have to remember that growth is often invisible until suddenly it isn't. That some of the most important changes happen underground, where no one is looking. One day, you will walk past something, a thriving community, a person's confidence, a tradition kept alive, and realize that you had a hand in its beginning. You won't sit under its shade, but you will know you were part of the reason it exists at all, and that knowledge, though quiet, is a kind of shelter in itself. To plant trees you'll never sit under is to live with the understanding that your life is bigger than you, that what you leave behind matters as much as what you hold now. And once you start living that way, you stop asking what you can take from the world, and start asking what you can take from the world, and start asking what you can give to it. Some doors cannot be forced open. They do not respond to noise, urgency, or repeated knocking. They wait. And the only way they yield is when you stop demanding entry and stand quietly enough to hear the lock turning on its own. In school, silence was often a punishment. A teacher's glare when you spoke out of turn, a room gone still during a test, the uneasy quiet when you didn't know the answer. But outside those walls, silence is not always absence. Sometimes, it is the key. The world is loud. Everyone is speaking, selling, performing, explaining. The constant noise can trick you into thinking that volume equals influence, that to be heard you must always be talking. But there are spaces, conversations, opportunities, moments of truth that will never open to volume. They open to stillness, to patience, to the willingness to let silence do its work. Silence makes room for what's hidden to rise. In noise, people tell you what they've prepared. In quiet, they tell you what they really mean. The longer you can sit without rushing to fill the space, the more the truth begins to surface. Some doors in life are people, guarded, private, cautious. You cannot batter them down with arguments or overwhelm them with charm. You have to be still long enough for them to decide you are safe. Silence in this sense is not withholding. It is offering space for trust to grow. Other doors are inside you. They lead to the answers you've been searching for, the clarity you've been chasing, but they will not open while you are running, scrolling, distracting yourself. You must step into the quiet, real quiet, the kind that feels uncomfortable at first, to hear the part of yourself that does not shout. Silence is also a form of respect. It says, I don't need to control this moment. I am willing to let it unfold. That respect is rare, and people can feel it. It is why some of the most powerful negotiations, reconciliations, and creative breakthroughs happen not in the flood of words, but in the pauses between them. In school, every second of silence felt like something to fill. In life, you learn that silence can be the signal that the real conversation is about to begin. The right kind of quiet is not empty, it is charged. It holds possibilities that noise can't reach. There will be times when silence feels unbearable, when you're desperate to break it just to relieve the tension. But if you can hold it, even for a little longer, you may notice the shift. The moment when the person across from you exhales and says the thing they've been holding back, or when your own thoughts settle enough for you to see clearly. Not every door should be opened, and not every silence will lead somewhere worth going, but you can't know which ones will unless you're willing to try. And trying means resisting the urge to push, when stillness is what's needed. One day, you will find yourself in a moment where everything depends on what you don't say, where the restraint you practice is the very thing that allows something fragile to survive. That's when you'll understand some doors open only in the quiet, and forcing them would have broken what was waiting behind them. The challenge is that silence doesn't give you obvious feedback. You can't always see it working, but if you trust it, if you learn to stand still and listen deeply, you'll find that some of the most important parts of life arrive, not with a bang, but with the soft click of a lock turning in the dark. Strength is easy to recognize when it is loud. The raised voice, the firm stance, the unshakable certainty. That's the kind of strength we are taught to notice in school, the kind that wins debates, commands a room, and leaves no doubt about who is in control. But there is another kind of strength, quieter and often overlooked, the kind hidden in softness. Softness is not weakness. It is the ability to stay open in a world that rewards hardness. It is choosing compassion when cruelty would be easier. It is holding on to kindness when anger would feel more satisfying in the moment. Softness is strength precisely because it is so difficult to maintain. The strong but soft know how to bend without breaking. They know that gentleness can disarm where force only provokes. They understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is lower your voice instead of raising it. In school, you learned to compete. For grades, for recognition, for approval. You learned that to be taken seriously, you had to be sharp, quick, and decisive. But in life, you discover that the people who can listen without judgment, forgive without conditions, and care without needing to be repaid, hold a kind of power that no competition can touch. Softness is strength because it requires control over yourself. Anger is easy. Retaliation is easy. Closing yourself off after being hurt is easy. Staying soft, still choosing to trust, still choosing to love, still choosing to believe in the possibility of good, that is difficult. That takes endurance. There will be people who mistake your softness for weakness, who try to take advantage of it, and there will be moments when you wonder if they're right, when it feels foolish to keep giving the benefit of the doubt, to keep showing patience, to keep letting people in. But softness does not mean letting yourself be trampled. It means knowing when to step back without hardening your heart in the process. Softness also allows you to see what hardness hides. In a conflict, the hard response focuses on winning. The soft response focuses on understanding, on looking past the surface to see what fear, pain, or need is fueling the other person's behavior. That doesn't mean excusing harm, but it does mean addressing its root instead of just its symptoms. In school, you were rewarded for correct answers, not for how you made people feel along the way, but in life, your ability to create safety and trust, the invisible work of softness, often determines more of your success than your ability to dominate a conversation. Softness can stop a fight before it begins. It can turn an enemy into an ally. It can open doors that force would slam shut forever. The person who is soft but steady, compassionate but unshakable, is not to be underestimated. Sometimes, the strength hidden in softness shows up in the smallest moments, letting someone cry without rushing them, giving someone the space to speak their truth even if it's uncomfortable, admitting when you're wrong without letting shame harden you. These moments may not look powerful, but they change things in ways that can't always be measured. One day, you may meet someone who embodies this kind of strength so completely that it disarms you. They will be calm where you would be defensive, open where you would be guarded, and you will feel the shift in yourself, a loosening, a quiet sense that you are safe. That is the effect of strength wrapped in softness. The truth is, anyone can be hard. It takes no special courage to put up walls, to meet force with force, but to remain soft in a world that often punishes softness, to keep showing up with kindness, with patience, with gentleness. That is strength few people will ever master. And when you learn to hold that kind of strength, you will find that you can face life's hardest blows without losing the parts of yourself that make you human. That is the strength worth keeping. Leaving is a skill. Most people think it's just about walking away, closing the door, cutting the tie. But there's an art to leaving, and a wisdom in doing it without setting fire to everything behind you. Burning a bridge can feel powerful in the moment, like a final declaration of independence. But bridges, once gone, are not easily rebuilt. And life has a way of circling back to places you thought you'd never need again. In school, leaving was simple. The semester ended. Summer began. Friendships faded without ceremony. But in life, departures carry weight. How you leave can echo for years, in your reputation, in your relationships, in the stories people tell about you after you're gone. Leaving without burning bridges begins with honesty. Not brutal, weaponized honesty, but the kind that allows you to part ways without poisoning the connection. It means saying what needs to be said, while resisting the temptation to punish. Anger burns hotter than truth, and once you light that fire, you can't control where it spreads. Sometimes you leave because you've outgrown a place. Other times you leave because staying would harm you. In both cases, the instincts to scorch the earth can be strong, especially if you've been hurt. But restraint is not weakness. It's an acknowledgement that even if you never return, the path back should remain intact, not for them, for you. Bridges are more than just routes between people or places. They're symbols of possibility. A bridge left standing says, I can still cross here if I choose, and sometimes years later you will choose, and be grateful you left the structure intact. There will be situations where the other side burns the bridge for you, where no matter how carefully you leave, they slam the door and set the match. That's not yours to control. What you can control is whether you add fuel to the fire or let it burn without your hand on it. Leaving without burning bridges also means leaving with dignity. It means resisting the need to win the final argument, to have the last word, to prove them wrong on your way out. Those victories are temporary, but the bitterness they leave behind lasts. In school, closure came in neat forms: report cards, graduation ceremonies, official endings. In life, closure is rarely handed to you. Sometimes you have to leave without it, trusting that the lack of resolution doesn't mean the decision was wrong. You may never get acknowledgement for the grace you show when leaving. The people you part from may never thank you for keeping the bridge intact. But the absence of conflict is its own reward. The ability to walk away without leaving chaos behind is a skill that will serve you again and again. One day you may find yourself in need of a connection you thought was gone forever. You'll reach out across the gap, and to your surprise, the bridge will still be there, weathered perhaps, but standing, and you'll realize that it's not just the bridge you preserved. It's the version of yourself that knew restraint, that understood that endings don't have to be destructive. The art of leaving without burning bridges is the art of thinking beyond the moment. It is knowing that the way you end things often says more about you than the way you began them, and it is trusting that strength is not proven by destruction, but by the choice to walk away without leaving smoke in the air. Success is sold to us as pure light, the applause, the recognition, the sense of having finally arrived. In school, it looked like honor rolls, awards, and grades high enough to post on the fridge. But in life, success casts shadows, and if you don't learn to see them, they can swallow you without warning. The first shadow is expectation. Once you succeed at something, people expect you to keep succeeding at the same level or higher every time. The achievement that once felt like freedom becomes a standard you are now obligated to maintain. What was once exciting becomes heavy. The second shadow is isolation. The higher you climb, the fewer people you find at your level. Not because they don't exist, but because the path up narrows, and some friendships can't survive the shift. People may cheer for your success in public, but in private, some will pull away. Jealousy, insecurity, or the simple fact that your new reality no longer fits theirs creates distance you didn't ask for. The third shadow is the loss of identity. Before success, you were a person. After success, you risk becoming a brand, a role, a collection of accomplishments. People begin to know you for what you've done, not who you are. And if you start believing them, you can forget how to exist outside of achievement. The fourth shadow is the fear of failure, sharper and more paralyzing than before you ever succeeded. When you have nothing, failure is expected. When you have something, failure feels like exposure, like proof that you never deserved what you earned. And then there's the shadow of sacrifice. Every success takes something from you: time, energy, relationships, health. The world celebrates the result, but rarely asks about the cost. They see the summit, and not the hours you spent climbing in the dark, the bruises, the compromises, the parts of yourself you left behind on the way up. In school, success was designed to be celebrated without complication. You received the medal, took the bow, and moved on. In life, the moment of celebration is often the smallest part of the story. The rest is the quiet aftermath. The work of sustaining, the loneliness of being admired but not understood, the weight of living in a space you fought to enter, but now feel trapped inside. None of this means success is bad. It means it is complex. It is light and shadow together, and the only way to survive it is to see both clearly. The way to keep success from swallowing you is to keep something in your life that cannot be measured, monetized, or applauded. A relationship, a practice, a purpose that exists outside the spotlight. This becomes your anchor, the place you return to when the shadows start to feel larger than the light. You must also learn to set boundaries around your own definition of success. If you let other people define it for you, they will always move the finish line, and you will always be running. One day, you will stand in a moment you once dreamed of, and it will not feel the way you thought it would. It will be quieter, heavier, stranger, and you will realize that the dream was never about the trophy. It was about the person you had to become to get there. That is the part worth keeping. The shadow side of success will always be there, but if you know it exists, you can walk in the light without pretending the dark isn't real. You can celebrate your victories while protecting the parts of yourself that no one else sees, and that in the end is the only kind of success that lasts. We spend so much of life trying to be remembered, From school yearbooks to social media timelines, we are taught that leaving a mark means you mattered. To be forgotten is framed as a kind of death. But there are times when being forgotten is not a loss, it is a gift. In school, being remembered was a sign of success. Teachers recalled your good work. Classmates remembered your achievements or your mistakes. Your identity felt secure because it lived in the minds of others. But in life, the constant weight of being remembered can become a cage. You are remembered for who you were, not who you are becoming. You are held to old versions of yourself you no longer inhabit. Being forgotten creates space. It allows you to step outside the roles people have assigned to you. When no one is watching, you can try, fail, change direction without the burden of expectation. You can shed an old identity without anyone insisting you wear it forever. It is easier to reinvent yourself when you are not being observed. When the world forgets your last performance, you are free to rehearse the next one in private. You are free to be a beginner again, without the embarrassment of starting over in full view. There is also a kind of peace in being forgotten. You no longer have to defend your choices to those who only knew a part of you. You no longer have to explain your growth to people committed to the version of you they met years ago. The silence left behind is not emptiness. It is room to breathe. Of course, being forgotten can sting. It can feel like erasure, like proof that you didn't matter as much as you hoped. But that sting fades when you realize that your worth was never meant to be stored in other people's memories. Worth is not what they keep, it is what you carry. Some will forget you because they've moved on. Others will forget you because your absence gave them no choice. And sometimes, you will be the one doing the forgetting, letting go of faces, names, and stories that once felt permanent. That forgetting, too, is a kind of freedom. In school, the past was always close. Old grades, old friends, old mistakes. Everything was documented and revisited. In life, the past begins to dissolve, unless you keep it alive. And while some memories are worth holding, others are lighter left behind. Being forgotten can protect you. It keeps you from being dragged back into battles you no longer need to fight. It shields you from the judgment of those who would prefer you never changed. It gives you the rare gift of anonymity in a world where everyone is trying to be seen. One day, you may walk through a place where you were once known, a workplace, a neighborhood, a circle of friends, and realize no one recognizes you anymore. At first, it may feel like loss, but then you notice the weight missing from your shoulders. You are no longer performing for an audience that remembers every old line. You are free to improvise. The gift of being forgotten is the gift of starting fresh without having to erase yourself. It is the chance to live without the constant echo of who you were, and if you can accept that gift, you may find that it's not about being remembered or forgotten at all. It's about living fully in the version of yourself that exists right now, without needing anyone else to confirm it. Most days pass through your hands once. You wake, you move through the hours, you sleep. The details blur into a single line on the calendar, already fading by the next morning. But some days, if you pay attention, can be lived twice, once in the moment, and once in the remembering. In school, living a day twice happened without effort. A trip, a celebration, even a funny moment in class could be replayed endlessly with friends, each retelling adding new details, deepening the memory. But adulthood moves faster. The moment you finish one thing, you are already thinking about the next. Days slip past without being fully seen, let alone lived again. To live a day twice, you must first slow down enough to truly live it the first time. You have to notice the small things that anchor the hours. The exact way sunlight lands across your desk, the rhythm of footsteps on a street you've walked 100 times, the warmth in a voice when someone says your name. These are the details that memory can hold on to. Without them, the day is a blur. The second way to live a day is through reflection. This doesn't have to mean writing in a journal, though that can help. It can be as simple as sitting quietly at the end of the night, letting the events replay in your mind. Not to judge them, but to feel them again. When you do this, you start to see connections you missed in the moment. You understand why something made you smile, why a passing comment lingered, why a moment of silence felt heavier than it seemed. Living a day twice also changes your relationship with time. It stretches it. When you replay the day, you give yourself more of it. You take what might have been a forgettable Tuesday and turn it into something you carry with you, not because it was extraordinary, but because you chose to see it fully. Some days are worth living twice, because they were beautiful. Others are worth living twice because they were difficult, because revisiting them helps you see the strength you carried through them, or the lesson you couldn't see while still in the middle of it. In school, you were taught to review only what was necessary, material for a test, notes for a project. In life, reviewing is not about memorizing facts. It's about noticing the truth of your own experience. You don't do it to pass a test, but to make sure the day doesn't vanish into nothing. The danger is that if you never live a day twice, the years blur. You look back and realize you can't distinguish one from another. Life feels short because you didn't give your days enough attention to make them last. You can also live a day twice through sharing. When you tell someone about your day, you re-experience it as you speak. You relive the moment through their curiosity, their reactions, and in the telling, you sometimes understand it differently. One day, you may find yourself in a quiet evening years from now, remembering a single ordinary day that you had chosen to live twice. It will be vivid, the weather, the smells, the conversation, because you had given it that second life in your mind. You'll realize that the richest parts of life are not always the rare, spectacular events, but the ordinary days you cared enough to notice and keep. Living a day twice is not about clinging to the past. It's about refusing to let the present slip away unnoticed. It's about giving the hours the dignity of being seen, felt, and remembered. And once you start doing it, you'll find that even the most ordinary days begin to feel like they matter more because they do. We are taught to see risk as danger. In school, risk meant wrong answers, lost points, embarrassment in front of the class. The safe path was rewarded. Follow the instructions, color inside the lines, avoid mistakes. But in life, avoiding risk entirely carries its own danger, one far greater than the risk itself. The risk of never risking is that you end up living the same day over and over, mistaking safety for stability. You avoid disappointment, but you also avoid discovery. You protect yourself from loss, but you also protect yourself from growth. You think you are avoiding danger, but what you are really avoiding is life. Taking risks is not about recklessness. It is about stepping into the space where the outcome is uncertain, because that is the only space where change can happen. Every meaningful shift, a career change, a confession of love, the decision to start something new, begins with not knowing exactly what will happen next. If you never risk, you never have to face failure, but you also never get to face the possibility of success. You never give yourself the chance to be surprised by what you're capable of. You become an expert at maintenance, not at creation. And eventually, maintenance becomes a kind of slow erosion. Your skills, your spirit, your curiosity wearing down under the weight of repetition. The risk of never risking is that you build a life so safe it becomes a cage. The bars are made of routines, obligations, and the constant calculation of how to avoid discomfort. From the outside, it may look like control. From the inside, it feels like suffocation. In school, risk was framed as a gamble, a question of luck. In life, risk is often a question of courage. Will you speak when silence would keep you comfortable? Will you move when staying would be easier? Will you choose the uncertain road, knowing it could lead to loss, but also to something you cannot reach from where you are? There is a quiet cost to never risking that doesn't show up all at once. It builds slowly, in the form of regret. The what-ifs you carry grow heavier over time, until they outweigh the fears that once kept you still, and by then, the chance to act may be gone. Some risks fail. They will hurt. They will embarrass you. They will strip away the illusion that you can control everything. But each failure teaches you that you can survive the fall, and that survival itself is a kind of power. The more you risk, the more you learn that loss is rarely the end of the story. If you never risk, you never learn the shape of your own resilience. You never test your ability to rebuild, to adapt, to start again. You tell yourself you're protecting yourself from pain, but what you're really doing is protecting yourself from the knowledge that you can endure it. One day, you will watch someone else take a leap you were too afraid to take. You will see them struggle, perhaps even fail, but you will also see them grow in ways you can't from the safety of the shore. And in that moment, you'll realize that the real loss is not in falling, but in never jumping at all. The risk of never risking is not that you will fail. It's that you will succeed in avoiding all the moments that could have changed you. You will build a life so tightly controlled that nothing unexpected can enter. Not the disasters, but not the miracles either. In the end, risk is not about what you might lose. It's about what you might never find if you refuse to try. And the only thing more dangerous than stepping into the unknown is convincing yourself you can live without ever doing it. You like to think your future belongs only to you, that tomorrow will be the direct result of your own choices, your own will, your own work. But look closely, and you'll see that many of the hands shaping your tomorrow are not your own. In school, the influence was obvious. Teachers grading your work, coaches deciding your place on the team, administrators setting the schedule. But in life, the shaping is more subtle. It's in the advice you take without questioning, the opportunities you accept or decline because of someone else's opinion, the quiet ways people's actions ripple forward into your path. Some of these hands are intentional. A mentor guides you toward a chance you might have missed. A friend introduces you to someone who will change the course of your career. These hands lift, open, and steady. They leave fingerprints of kindness on your future. Other hands shape you without meaning to. A careless word in childhood that makes you doubt yourself for years. A decision someone else made. To move away, to leave, to stay, that alters the direction of your life in ways neither of you could have predicted. And then there are the hands you don't notice until much later. The stranger whose small act of generosity shifts your outlook on humanity. The person you barely knew who vouched for you when it mattered. The invisible support that kept you steady without you realizing you were leaning on it. The truth is, your tomorrow is a collaboration. You hold the pen, but others have left notes in the margins. Some of those notes are helpful, some are warnings, some are in a handwriting you no longer recognize. The challenge is to decide which hands you allow to keep shaping you. Not all deserve that power. Just because someone has been there for years doesn't mean they should be guiding your next steps. Some hands will hold you back under the guise of protecting you. Others will try to mold you into a version of yourself that fits their needs but not your truth. In school, you learned to respect authority by default. In life, you have to choose it. You have to decide whose guidance is worth following, whose influence is worth carrying into the next day. That means paying attention to the results, not just the words. Do the hands shaping you lead you toward growth, or toward shrinking? Do they encourage courage, or cultivate fear? Sometimes the most important decision you make is to remove someone's hands from your life, not in anger, but in clarity. Because once you see that they are shaping a tomorrow you don't want, the only way forward is to reclaim that part of your future for yourself. But here's the other truth. You are one of those hands for someone else. You may not even realize it. A casual suggestion, a gesture of support, a simple "I believe in you." These can plant themselves in someone's mind and keep growing long after you've forgotten the moment. The way you treat people today will echo into their tomorrows. One day, you will look at where you are and see the outlines of all the hands that helped shape you, the ones you welcomed, the ones you resisted, the ones you didn't notice until they were gone. And you will understand that your life is not solely the result of your own willpower. It is a tapestry woven with the intentions, mistakes, generosity, and limitations of many others. The work, then, is not to control every hand. That's impossible. The work is to notice them, to thank the ones that lift you, to release the ones that hold you back, and to be intentional with your own when they reach into someone else's life. Because tomorrow will always be shaped by many hands, but you get to choose how much space yours take up in the shaping of your own. Loss comes in many shapes. The obvious ones, death, breakups, endings you can name, are easier to recognize, even when they hurt. But there are quieter losses, the version of yourself you no longer are, the dreams that quietly dissolve, the people who fade without ceremony. Losing is inevitable. Becoming lost because of it is not. In school, losing was straightforward. You failed a test, lost a game, didn't get picked. It stung, but the rules were clear. There was always another test, another season, another chance. In life, the rules are harder to see, and the chances aren't guaranteed. Loss feels more final, and it can pull you into a place where you no longer recognize yourself. The danger isn't in the loss itself. It's in the way loss can rearrange your inner compass. It can make you question your worth, your direction, your ability to continue. If you're not careful, you start navigating by absence instead of possibility, charting your life by what's gone instead of what remains. To lose without being lost, you have to separate what you lost from who you are. You are not the job you left, the relationship that ended, the dream that didn't work out. Those things shaped you, yes, but they are not the sum of you. Your worth is not erased just because something you valued is gone. You also have to resist the urge to fill the empty space too quickly. Loss leaves a gap, and it's tempting to shove something else into it just to stop feeling the ache. But rushing to replace what you lost can keep you from understanding what it meant to you in the first place, and from seeing what could grow there naturally if you gave it time. There will be moments when loss feels like disorientation, like standing in a place you used to know and finding all the landmarks gone. That's when you have to anchor yourself to the constants. The people who remain, the values that haven't shifted, the parts of yourself that survived. Some losses never fully heal. They become part of the architecture of who you are. But even then, you can carry them without letting them define the rest of your map. They can be stones you walk on instead of weights that sink you. In school, a loss could be redeemed by proving yourself next time. In life, redemption sometimes means letting go of the need to win again at all. It means learning to carry the lesson without needing to erase the pain. One of the strangest truths about loss is that it can open you in ways success never could. It strips away illusions, forces you to see what you were relying on, and shows you the edges of yourself you hadn't met before. It can make you more empathetic, more resilient, more aware of how fragile and precious things really are. To lose without being lost is to let yourself feel the absence without letting it become the whole story. It is to honor what's gone without abandoning what's still here. It is to walk forward, even when the path feels unfamiliar, trusting that direction can be rebuilt one step at a time. One day, you will look back at a loss that felt unbearable and realize you carried it without losing yourself. You will see the ways it shaped you without breaking you, and you will understand that survival is not just about holding on, it's about refusing to let the emptiness decide who you are. We are taught to follow roads that already exist. In school, the paths were clear. Complete the assignment, pass the test, move to the next level. Every turn was marked, every destination mapped. But the most important journeys in life don't come with signs or directions. They begin with a step onto ground no one has walked yet. The roads that don't exist until you make them. The danger of only walking familiar roads is that you end up traveling in circles. You might cover impressive distance, collect milestones, even feel accomplished, but you'll always arrive at places someone else has already been. To go somewhere truly new, you must leave the paved routes and start where the map turns blank. The roads that don't exist yet are not obvious. They're hidden inside questions no one can answer for you. Ideas that feel impossible until you try. Dreams so strange you hesitate to speak them aloud. They are often disguised as detours, failures, or accidents. Building them requires risk. You won't have signs to tell you you're going the right way, and the ground beneath you will not always be solid. People will question your direction. Some will warn you to turn back, not out of malice, but because they can't imagine a path they can't see. In school, you were graded on how well you followed instructions. Out here, the instructions may not exist yet. You become both the traveler and the cartographer, the one walking and the one drawing the map as you go. The hardest part of making a road is that for a long time, it won't look like a road at all. It will look like wandering. You'll question yourself. You'll wonder if you've made a mistake, if you should have taken the safe, known way instead, and there will be moments when you envy those who stayed on the pavement. But something happens when you keep going. The ground starts to show a faint trail where your feet have been. The bends and rises begin to connect. You notice you've created a direction where there was none before. Sometimes, these roads are meant only for you. Other times they become paths others will follow, finding courage in your footsteps. And while they may never know your name, they will walk a little farther, a little bolder, because you proved the terrain could hold weight. The roads that don't exist yet are not always glamorous. They can lead through lonely stretches, unmarked challenges, and uncertain weather, but they also lead to views you could never have seen from the main road, to destinations you couldn't have imagined from the safety of the map. One day you will look back and see both roads, the one everyone told you to take and the one you made yourself. And even if it was harder, lonelier and slower, you will know you chose the one worth walking, because it didn't just take you somewhere new, it made you someone new. The truth is, the most important parts of your life will be built on roads that didn't exist until you set out, and once you've done it once, you will never again believe the map is the limit. Some truths live in the open, visible to anyone who looks. Others hide behind evidence, research, measurements, hard data. These are the truths you can hold up to the light and defend with facts. But then there are the truths you can't prove, the ones that live in the quiet spaces between experience and belief, the ones you feel in your bones but can't hand to someone else like a polished stone. In school, truth was something you could show your work for. A correct answer had to be backed by the right method. If you couldn't prove it, it didn't count. But in life, some of the most important truths refuse to fit into that box. You can't prove the exact moment you fell in love. Even if you remember the day, you can't prove the way a song once changed the shape of your thoughts. You can't prove that someone's absence still lingers in the air years after they're gone. And yet, you know these things as surely as you know the ground will hold you when you step on it. The truth you can't prove is not less real. It's just harder to share. You can tell the story, but it will sound incomplete. You can describe the feeling, but the words will always be a little too small. People who have lived something similar will nod in recognition. Those who haven't may smile politely and change the subject. The danger is that you might start doubting yourself simply because you can't convince anyone else. In a world that values evidence above all, believing in something you can't prove can feel like holding water in your hands while others watch it leak away. But the truth is not dependent on the crowd's belief. It stands whether anyone else sees it or not. Some of these unprovable truths will guide your choices. You may leave a job because something in you whispers it's time, even when the numbers say otherwise. You may trust someone instantly for no logical reason, and be right. You may avoid a path because it feels wrong in a way you can't explain, and later learn why. These moments can be dismissed as luck, instinct, or coincidence. But deep down, you know they are something more. They are the places where experience becomes knowing without needing proof, where your life's quiet patterns speak louder than any statistic. In school, you were rewarded for certainty you could demonstrate. In life, you have to make peace with certainty that can't be displayed. This is a different kind of strength. The strength to hold your truth even when you can't hand it to someone else. One day, you may find yourself defending a decision that no one else understands. They will ask for proof, for reasons, for evidence, and you won't have it. Not in the way they want. You'll only have the unshakable sense that you're right, and that will have to be enough. The truth you can't prove is often the truth that shapes you the most. It's the quiet conviction that keeps you moving when reason tells you to stop. The invisible thread that pulls you toward a life you haven't yet seen. It's the kind of truth that can't be taught, only lived. And while you may never be able to prove it to anyone else, you will one day see its proof in the way your life unfolds, in the places it has carried you, in the storms it has helped you survive, in the peace that comes from knowing you were right to trust it all along. We are taught to believe that healing requires closure, that before you can move forward, you need the person who hurt you to acknowledge what they did, to say the words you've been waiting for. I'm sorry. In school, apologies were part of the script. You said them to smooth things over, to reset the balance, to make peace. But in life, the apology you deserve may never come. Some people will never admit they hurt you. Some will twist the story until you doubt your own memory. Others will give you an apology so hollow it echoes. Words shaped like remorse but empty of truth. If you wait for those words to heal, you may be waiting for the rest of your life. Healing without an apology is not about pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's about refusing to let someone else's silence dictate your future. It's deciding that their inability to take responsibility will not become the anchor that keeps you in place. The first step is accepting that the apology is for them, not for you. It is their acknowledgement of wrongdoing, their step toward growth, but your healing does not have to be chained to their willingness to take it. You can move without their permission. Healing without an apology means giving yourself the validation you were hoping to receive from them. It means telling yourself, yes, what happened was wrong. Yes, it mattered. Yes, my pain is real. You become the witness you were waiting for. In school, authority figures acted as referees. They stepped in to settle disputes, to assign blame, to make things fair. But out here, fairness is often an illusion. No one may step in to set things right, and yet you can still choose not to live inside the wound. Sometimes, you have to heal while the wound is still open. You tend to it with boundaries, with distance, with new experiences that remind you the world is bigger than this pain. You learn to carry the scar without letting it define your shape. Forgiveness may come into it, but it doesn't have to. Forgiving someone is a gift you give yourself, not a requirement for healing. And sometimes, the most honest thing you can do is admit that you are not ready to forgive, but you are ready to stop letting the hurt rule your life. Healing without an apology often means building something in the space the hurt left behind. A new friendship, a new project, a new way of speaking to yourself. It's not about replacing what was lost, but about showing yourself that life still expands in other directions. One of the most liberating moments comes when you realize you don't need them to see your worth for it to exist. You don't need them to admit the truth for it to be true. You don't need them to regret what they did for you to stop carrying the weight of it. One day, you may hear their name, or see their face, and feel nothing. Not rage, not longing, just the calm distance of someone who has walked far enough away that the wound no longer controls the view. And in that moment, you'll understand, you healed without their apology. You built your own closure. The apology that never came didn't keep you from moving forward. It kept them standing still. You've been building something new while they've been guarding the wreckage, and that is a kind of victory they will never see. Lonely and alone are often treated as the same thing, but they are not. Alone is a physical state. Lonely is an emotional one. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. You can be entirely by yourself and feel perfectly at peace. The difference lies not in how many people are near you, but in whether you feel connected to them, to yourself, to the moment you're in. In school, being alone was often framed as a problem. You sat by yourself at lunch, you walked the hallways without a group, and people assumed something was wrong. But alone is not inherently negative. Alone is simply the absence of company. It says nothing about the quality of your experience. Loneliness, on the other hand, can creep in, even in the most crowded places. It's the sense of being unseen, unheard, untouched by the presence around you. It's watching life happen at arm's length, while you remain outside of it. The danger is that loneliness can make you fear aloneness, as if being alone will always feel empty. But solitude, the intentional choice to be alone, can be deeply nourishing. It gives you space to hear your own thoughts without interference, to remember what your mind sounds like when it's not echoing someone else's voice. Loneliness is a hunger for connection. Solitude is the meal you make for yourself when no one else is at the table. One depletes you, the other restores you. To understand the difference, you have to look at the source. Loneliness often comes from disconnection, from others, yes, but also from yourself. You can be lonely even in a relationship if you've stopped showing up fully, or if the other person has. You can be lonely in your own home if you've stopped paying attention to what you need. Being alone doesn't have to mean being cut off. Some of the most content people are those who know how to be alone without feeling the ache of loneliness. They see it not as a void, but as a space, one they can fill with reflection, creativity, rest, or simply the absence of noise. In school, you were taught that togetherness was the default, group projects, team sports, assemblies. But life teaches you that togetherness is not the same as connection, and that aloneness is not the same as abandonment. Sometimes, you need to step into aloneness to cure your loneliness. You need to strip away the shallow, distracting connections that keep you busy but not fulfilled, and replace them with fewer, deeper ones, including the one you have with yourself. One day, you may find yourself alone in a quiet place, not because you were left behind, but because you chose to be there. You'll feel no panic, no emptiness, just a calm recognition that your own presence is enough. And in that moment, you'll understand loneliness fades, not when you have more people, but when you have more connection, and that begins with you. There are seasons in life that arrive quietly and leave before you realize they were temporary. You think they'll return, that the same mix of people, places, and feelings will gather again, but they never do. Not because the memories fade, but because the conditions that created them cannot be replicated. In school, the rhythm of life was predictable. Summers came back, class schedules repeated, friends gathered in the same hallways year after year. It felt like everything could be revisited, if you just waited long enough. But outside those walls, time moves differently. Seasons change without announcing themselves, and by the time you look up, they've gone. The season that never comes back can be joyful. The months when your friendships felt effortless, when you woke up excited without knowing why, when the smallest pleasures filled your whole day. Or it can be bittersweet, a chapter you didn't love while you were in it, but that you now see was quietly holding something precious. What makes these seasons unique is not just the events, but the convergence. The people who happened to be there, the places that hadn't yet changed, the version of you who existed only then, carrying a perspective you'll never have again. The danger is that you don't always recognize a season while you're living it. You assume it's just life, that it will stretch on indefinitely. You don't think to memorize the exact sound of the laughter, the shade of light through the window, the way the days seem to arrange themselves without effort. Only later do you wish you had paid more attention. Sometimes you try to go back, to revisit the place, to gather the same people, to recreate the conditions. And while there may be echoes, it's never the same. The details might match, but the time, the feeling, the you that existed then, those can't be summoned. This is not a loss to mourn so much as a truth to live by. That some seasons exist only once, and their value lies in their impermanence. They remind you to notice what's here now, not just what's gone. In school, change was marked on a calendar. In life, it happens in the middle of an ordinary day. You close your eyes in one season, and open them in another. Sometimes you don't even realize it until much later, when you look back and realize you've crossed a threshold you can't return through. The season that never comes back teaches you that the present is already a memory in the making. It asks you to treat it with the same reverence you give your most cherished past. It invites you to live now in a way that won't leave you wishing you'd been more awake to it. One day you'll think about a time in your life that felt small then but glows in hindsight. You'll realize it was a season you can't get back. And instead of longing for its return, you'll carry its lesson to honor the seasons as they happen, knowing that part of their beauty is that they will end. Speaking so people listen is not about volume. It's not about having the loudest voice in the room, or the fastest reply, or the most polished argument. It's about creating a moment in which someone else wants to lean in, not because they have to, but because they feel you have something worth hearing. In school, speaking was often a performance. You raised your hand to give the right answer. You delivered presentations to prove you'd done the work. The goal was to meet expectations, not to invite connection. But outside those walls, speaking becomes something else. It's not about impressing, it's about reaching. The first truth is this: people listen to those who listen to them. If you want your words to land, they must grow out of genuine understanding. That means paying attention before you speak, not just to the words, but to the pauses, the tone, the unspoken signals. People can feel when you've actually heard them, and they open themselves to hearing you in return. The second truth is that clarity matters more than complexity. You don't need ornate language to make an impact. You need precision, words chosen for meaning, not for decoration. Clarity isn't about simplifying your thoughts. It's about removing the noise so the heart of what you're saying can come through. The third truth is that tone carries farther than content. People may forget your exact words, but they will remember how those words made them feel. You can be right and still be unheard if your tone closes the listener before the meaning can enter. Speaking so people listen also means choosing your moment. Even the truest thing, said at the wrong time, can bounce off unheard. Patience is part of speaking well, waiting until the listener has space for what you're offering, even if it means holding your words for longer than you'd like. In school, the audience was captive. They had to listen because they were required to. In life, no one owes you their attention. You have to earn it, and the earning happens in the space before the words are spoken, in the trust you've built, the respect you've shown, the consistency of your presence. Sometimes, speaking so people listen means saying less, letting silence carry weight between your sentences, allowing your listener time to breathe with your words instead of drowning in them. Brevity, when done with intention, can make each word sharper, heavier, more likely to stay. Other times, it means telling a story. Facts inform, but stories live in people's minds. They create images and emotions that remain long after the details fade. A single image, a door left open, a hand unclenched, can hold more power than a page of explanation. You will notice that the people who speak in a way that makes others listen do not rush. They don't throw their words like stones to get attention. They place them like seeds, trusting they will take root. They understand that impact is not instant. It's something that grows in the mind of the listener over time. One day, you may say something that changes the way someone sees the world. They might not tell you right away. They might not even realize it in the moment. But weeks, months, years later, they will remember. Not because you demanded they listen, but because you spoke in a way that made listening inevitable. Speaking so, people listen is not about power over them. It's about respect for them. It's about crafting your words like an offering instead of a weapon, trusting that when they land with care they will carry farther than you could ever push them. Peace is often imagined as something you can reach if you work hard enough. A prize waiting at the end of achievement, a reward for solving every problem, a place where nothing can disturb you. School encouraged this idea in its own way. Finish all your assignments, pass your exams, get through the term, and only then will you have your break. Rest and peace came after the work was done. But real peace doesn't work like that. You can't chase it down and hold it. The harder you run after it, the faster it slips away. Peace is not a finish line. It's a state you step into, often when you stop trying to force it into existence. The first truth about peace is that it doesn't require perfect conditions. In fact, waiting for the world to quiet down before you allow yourself to be calm is the surest way to never find it. Peace is not the absence of storms. It's the ability to carry stillness inside you while the storm moves around you. The second truth is that chasing peace often creates the opposite. The endless search, the "I'll be happy when" mindset, keeps you running in circles. You set conditions, you'll feel at peace when you make more money, when you move to a quieter place, when certain people change, but the list only grows, and peace keeps moving further away. Sometimes peace comes disguised as surrender, not giving up, but letting go of the need to control every outcome, letting go of the fight to make people see you a certain way, letting go of the belief that life must feel a certain way before you can rest within it. In school, peace was something external, a quiet library, an empty classroom, a lunch period without conflict. In life, it is something internal. You can find it in a crowded subway, in the middle of a difficult conversation, in the brief pause between breaths. The peace you can't chase often finds you when you are focused on something else entirely, when you are absorbed in a task you care about, when you are laughing with someone and forget to think about whether you're happy, when you are sitting in the sunlight and without meaning to, stop needing anything to be different. It's important to see that peace is not always soft. Sometimes it's firm, steady, unshakable. It is the quiet confidence that you can handle what comes, even if it isn't what you wanted. It's the voice inside you that says, "This is enough," even when the world insists you should want more. Chasing peace often comes from the belief that you are missing something, but peace grows when you recognize what you already have. That doesn't mean settling for less than you deserve. It means seeing that you can feel whole even while you work toward more. One day you may find yourself in the middle of a situation that would have once shattered you, and instead you feel steady. You'll notice the absence of panic, the quiet inside your own chest, and you'll realize that this is the peace you couldn't chase, the peace that arrived because you built it from within. The truth is, you can't capture peace like a possession. You can only practice it. You can only make room for it. And when it comes, it won't feel like something you found. It will feel like something you uncovered, something that was always there beneath the noise. Forgiveness is often imagined as a conversation. Two people sitting across from each other, speaking truths, exchanging apologies, closing the chapter. That's the version school quietly suggested in its lessons. If someone hurts you, you talk it out. You hear each other. You shake hands. But in life, it's rarely that neat. Sometimes you can't, or shouldn't, make contact with the person you need to forgive. Maybe they're gone. Maybe they're dangerous. Maybe speaking to them would tear open wounds you've worked too hard to close. Whatever the reason, the question remains, how do you forgive when you can't or won't have the conversation? The first truth is that forgiveness is not for them. It's for you. It's the act of setting down a weight you no longer want to carry, even if they never know you've done it. You don't forgive because they asked. You forgive because you're tired of being chained to the memory. Without contact, forgiveness begins as an internal decision. It's the quiet acknowledgement. Yes, this happened. Yes, it hurt. But I will not let it define the rest of my story. You don't need their voice to make that declaration real. Forgiving without contact often means creating your own ritual, writing a letter you'll never send, speaking the words aloud in an empty room, imagining the conversation in your mind, saying everything you would have said, then walking away. It's not about them hearing it. It's about you releasing it. In school, forgiveness was about restoring the relationship. You shook hands after an argument and returned to the same table at lunch. In life, forgiveness may mean walking away for good. It may mean closing a door and locking it, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. The danger of contact is that it can reignite the wound. You may hope for understanding and find only defensiveness. You may hope for remorse and get indifference. Forgiving without contact removes the risk of reopening the injury in the presence of the one who caused it. It's also important to see that forgiveness without contact doesn't mean reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still choose never to see them again. Forgiveness frees you, reconciliation ties you back together. They are not the same act, and one does not require the other. Sometimes, forgiveness without contact feels incomplete at first. You may find yourself rehearsing the unsaid words, replaying the old moments. That's normal. Forgiveness is not a single step. It's a practice. You return to it again and again, each time loosening the knot a little more. One day you'll think of them and feel nothing, not rage, not longing, just the lightness of something that no longer grips you. You'll realize that the power they once had over your thoughts is gone. That's the moment forgiveness is complete, whether they know it or not. Forgiving without contact is not about denying the harm. It's about deciding that the harm will not continue to shape your future. You carry the lesson, but you set down the weight, and you do it without needing their permission to walk away lighter. Boredom is one of the first emotions you're taught to escape. In school, a bored student was seen as a problem to be fixed, given extra work, redirected to a task, told to pay attention. At home, boredom was met with screens, distractions, noise to fill the empty space. You learned early that boredom was an enemy, a signal that something had gone wrong. But what if boredom is not a problem to solve, but a doorway to walk through? Boredom is the absence of stimulation. Yes, but it's also the fertile ground from which creativity, clarity, and unexpected ideas can grow. It's the quiet before the mind starts to wander somewhere new. The moments when you think there's nothing to do are often the moments when your mind begins to uncover what it actually wants to do. The trouble is that we've built a life where boredom is almost impossible. Every idle second can be filled with scrolling, streaming, swiping. The smallest pause is an invitation to reach for a distraction, and in doing so, we rob ourselves of the treasures boredom can bring. When you let yourself sit in boredom, you create space for the mind to stretch. You start noticing details, the rhythm of your own breathing, the shifting light across the floor, the sound of the wind outside. These aren't spectacular things, but they pull you back into presence. From there, the mind begins to wander in ways it never does when every moment is curated by someone else's content. Some of the most important ideas in history were born in moments of idleness, when the mind was left alone long enough to make connections it wouldn't otherwise make. Boredom pushes you to create your own interest, and in doing so, it leads you toward parts of yourself you might not meet otherwise. In school, boredom was framed as wasted time. In life, you may discover that boredom is sometimes the most productive time you have, not in the measurable sense, not in tasks completed or goals met, but in the invisible sense of ideas formed, problems solved, perspectives shifted. The treasure buried in boredom is subtle. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It might be a single thought that changes the way you see something. It might be the spark for a project you didn't know you wanted to start. It might be the realization that the thing you've been chasing isn't what you really want. The key is not to run from boredom, but to meet it, to let the restless feeling wash over you without immediately numbing it, to see what's underneath it, instead of covering it up. Sometimes you'll find that boredom is just a layer of discomfort hiding a deeper need for rest, for play, for connection, for creation. One day, you might allow yourself an hour with no phone, no TV, no background noise. At first, you'll fidget. You'll think of all the things you could be doing, but then, something will shift. Your mind will start to wander down paths it hasn't walked in years. You'll remember a dream you set aside, an idea you never tried, a thought you didn't know you were ready to have. Boredom is not a void, it's a canvas, and the longer you can stand to look at it, the more it begins to fill, not with what the world hands you, but with what you create for yourself. That is the treasure, not just the ideas boredom gives you, but the proof that your mind can entertain itself, build worlds on its own, and still surprise you with what it finds there. Long before you learned your first spoken word, you were already fluent in another language, one that didn't need grammar, vocabulary, or punctuation. You knew how to read the curve of a smile, the tension in a voice, the way someone's shoulders lifted when they saw you. You spoke with your eyes, your hands, your posture. You listened with your attention, not your ears alone. In school, communication was measured in essays, speeches, debates, words stacked upon words. The unspoken was secondary, often invisible. But in life, the language that needs no words is often the one that speaks loudest. A glance across a crowded room can hold more weight than a paragraph. A hand placed gently on someone's shoulder can say, "I'm here," more clearly than a dozen reassurances. Silence can speak in tones that no sentence can match. This wordless language works because it bypasses the part of the mind that analyzes and debates. It lands directly in the body, in the intuition. You don't need to figure out a feeling when you've already felt it. That's why this language often feels truer. It doesn't need translation. The danger is that we forget to speak it. The noise of modern life pulls us toward constant verbal explanation, constant clarification. We fill silences with words not because they're needed, but because we're afraid of what the absence of them might mean. But the absence is where this language thrives. In the space between sentences, in the breath before a reply, in the pause that says, "I'm thinking of you." You can't rush this language. You can't force it. You can only create the conditions where it can surface. In school, you may have learned to defend yourself with words. Out here, you may find that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply meet someone's eyes and not look away, or to be present in a room without needing to fill it with sound. The language that needs no words is also the one that never lies easily. Words can be rehearsed, but your body speaks in real time. Your eyes betray fear or joy. Your hands betray tension or ease. Your presence or absence says more than the best speech you could give. To learn this language again, you must first relearn how to listen to it. Notice how someone's tone changes, even when their words don't. Notice how they lean forward or pull back. Notice how you feel in your own body in their presence, because your body will read their signals before your mind catches up. One day, you'll be with someone who doesn't have the right words for what they're feeling. Maybe they're grieving. Maybe they're in love. Maybe they're lost in between, and you'll realize you don't need their words to understand. You'll see it in the way they move, hear it in the rhythm of their breathing, feel it in the space between you, and in that moment you'll reply without speaking. Maybe with a look, maybe with your presence alone. This is the language that builds trust faster than conversation. It's the language of the unsaid, the untranslatable, the deeply human. It's the one you were fluent in before you could speak, and the one you will still understand when words are gone. One day, you will look in the mirror and see someone you don't fully recognize. The shape of your face will be the same, perhaps older, perhaps lined in new ways, but the person inside will not be the one you remember being. This is not a failure. This is not a loss. This is the inevitability of living. You will outgrow versions of yourself so completely that you will become a stranger to your own past. In school, identity felt fixed. You were told to be yourself, as if that self were a single thing to find and hold on to. But the truth is, you will not be the same person for very long. You are a shifting constellation of choices, experiences, and perspectives, rearranging themselves in ways you cannot predict. The stranger you'll become will not arrive all at once. They will come in quiet increments. A decision you wouldn't have made a year ago, a reaction that surprises you, a change in taste, in belief, in the way you see the world. One day you'll notice that the things that once defined you no longer fit, like clothes left in the back of a closet, waiting for a body you no longer have. Meeting this stranger can be unsettling. You might miss the old you, the one who believed certain things, loved certain people, moved through the world in certain ways. You might feel guilt for letting go of them, as if you've betrayed some earlier promise. But that old self was never meant to be permanent. They were a chapter, not the whole story. The stranger you'll become will carry some things forward, pieces of you that remain constant, but they will also hold truths you can't yet imagine. You may not agree with them at first. You may even resist them. But the stranger is not your enemy. They are simply the version of you shaped by what life will bring. In school, the measure of growth was visible. Grades, achievements, milestones. Out here, the measure of growth is quieter. It is in how you choose when no one is watching. It is in the thoughts you keep to yourself. It is in how you respond to both joy and loss. The stranger you'll become will live with the consequences of your present choices. Every boundary you set, every risk you take, every habit you form is shaping them. You are building them in real time, and someday they will thank or curse you for the foundation you laid. Sometimes, meeting this stranger will feel like returning home. You will recognize them instantly and know you've been walking toward them all along. Other times, it will feel like meeting someone across a crowded street, uncertain if you should wave. Both are part of the process. One day you will think of a younger you, the one sitting in a classroom, dreaming about the future, and you will realize that they could never have pictured this version of you. And that's the point. Life is not about becoming who you plan to be. It's about becoming who you couldn't have imagined. The stranger you'll become will still be you, just not the you know right now. And when they arrive, you'll learn to listen to them, because they are the one who will carry you forward, while the old you remains only as memory. Memory has a way of holding its own light and shadow. You look back, and the images return, the things you said, the things you didn't say, the moments you wish you could press between glass to preserve exactly as they were, And then there are the ones you wish you could scrub from the record entirely. Regret often lives in the same rooms as memory, sitting in the corner, whispering, "You should have done it differently." In school, remembering was about accuracy. Dates on a test, facts in order, the right version of the past. No one told you how slippery real memory can be, or how much it changes depending on the angle from which you look at it. Out here, remembering is not about perfect recall. It's about what you choose to carry, and how you carry it. To remember without regret, you first have to accept that the past cannot be edited. This doesn't mean you have to approve of everything you did or endured. It means you acknowledge that it happened, that it shaped you, and that no amount of wishing can rearrange it. The alternative is to live in a loop, replaying the same scene, hoping that this time it will end differently. The second truth is that regret is not always a villain. Regret can point to what matters. It shows you where you acted out of fear instead of love, where you abandoned yourself, where you let the moment pass instead of speaking. Without regret, you might not know what you value. The problem is not feeling regret. The problem is letting it take over the entire memory. Remembering without regret means holding the whole picture. Yes, you might have made a mistake, but what else was true in that moment? Were you doing the best you could with what you knew then? Did that misstep lead you somewhere unexpected, somewhere better? Sometimes the very thing you wish you could erase was the turning point that made you who you are now. In school, mistakes were red marks on a page, fixed only by correction. In life, mistakes are threads in the fabric. Pull one out, and the whole pattern shifts. You can't know what removing it would cost, only that it would not leave you the same. One way to remember without regret is to practice looking at the past with the same compassion you would offer someone else. If a friend told you the story you tell yourself, would you judge them as harshly, or would you understand that they were navigating with the map they had at the time? Another way is to see that memory is not a static archive. It is alive, reshaped each time you visit it. The more often you revisit with shame, the deeper that pathway becomes. But if you return with gentleness, with the willingness to see more than just the wound, you can change the texture of the memory without changing the facts. One day you may find yourself telling a story from your past, one that used to sting, and notice that it no longer does. You may even smile while telling it. That's the moment you've learned how to hold the memory without the weight of regret. The past hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. Remembering without regret doesn't mean pretending everything was fine. It means accepting that you were a different person then, and letting that version of you rest. It means carrying forward the lessons without carrying forward the punishment. Because the truth is, if you spend your life rewriting the past in your mind, you'll miss the one thing you still have power over: the way you live now. And maybe the best way to honor your memories, even the painful ones, is to live in a way that the future version of you can remember without regret. Somewhere along the way, school planted a simple equation in your mind. Work equals effort, effort equals difficulty, and difficulty is something to push through, so you can get to the good part, the break, the reward, the weekend. Work was framed as a duty, something separate from joy. You did it because you had to, not because you wanted to. But in life, you may discover a different kind of work, the kind that blurs the line between duty and desire, the kind that absorbs you so completely you lose track of hours, the kind that feels less like a burden and more like breathing. It's not that it's effortless, it's that the effort fuels you instead of draining you. This kind of work rarely arrives on command. You can't just decide to love what you do because you've been told to find your passion. Instead, it often emerges slowly, like a path revealed one step at a time. You follow curiosity, you test, you discard what doesn't fit, and somewhere in the process, you find something that clicks, a rhythm that feels natural, a problem you want to solve, a skill you want to sharpen. The work that never feels like work is not always the easiest. In fact, it can be harder, more demanding, more consuming than anything else. The difference is that the difficulty feels worth it. Every challenge is an invitation, not an obstacle. Every setback is a puzzle you want to crack, not a wall you want to walk away from. In school, you learn to work for grades, for gold stars, for approval. But this kind of work doesn't rely on external rewards. The act itself is the reward. You find yourself eager to return to it, even when no one is watching, even when no one will applaud. This doesn't mean you'll feel joy every moment. Even the work you love will have days when it frustrates you, but the frustration won't feel like a sign to quit. It will feel like proof that you care enough to be bothered. Finding this kind of work often requires unlearning what you've been taught about success. Sometimes it means walking away from something that looks good on paper but leaves you numb. It means trusting that energy is a more reliable compass than prestige. The work that never feels like work can take many forms. Building, teaching, writing, designing, fixing, caring, creating. It can be solitary or shared. It can be in a studio, a workshop, a kitchen, a field. What matters is not the label but the way it engages you, the way it makes you forget, for a while, to measure the hours. One day you may notice that what began as a side project is now the part of your week you look forward to most, or that a task others avoid is the one you secretly hope lands on your desk. These are signs. Pay attention. The work that never feels like work doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it just slips in quietly, making itself at home. The danger is that once you find it, the world will try to turn it into real work in the old sense, with quotas, deadlines, and metrics that strip away the joy. Protect it where you can. Keep some part of it yours, unmeasured, unmonetized. Because the fastest way to kill the work you love is to make it answer to the wrong rewards. In school, the question was, what do you want to be when you grow up? Out here, the better question is, what can you do for hours without resenting it, even when it's hard? The answer may not come easily, but once you find it, you'll understand that work and joy are not opposites. They can live in the same breath. And maybe the real goal is not to escape work entirely, but to build a life where more and more of what you do feels like the work that never feels like work. Some walls you can see. They rise from the ground, solid and undeniable, casting shadows you can trace with your fingers. Others are invisible, built not from stone, but from habits, fears, and unspoken rules. These walls are harder to notice because they exist in your mind, in your routines, in the quiet limits you place on yourself without realizing you've placed them there. In school, walls were physical, the classroom, the boundaries of the playground, the rules posted on the wall. You knew where they began and ended. But as you grow older, the boundaries shift inward. The walls you build without bricks are not there to keep others out. They're often there to keep yourself in. They take many forms. The decision not to apply for something because you've already decided you won't get it. The hesitation to speak because you've convinced yourself your words won't matter. The quiet belief that you're not the kind of person who does certain things. None of these limits exist in reality. They're structures you've constructed in your own mind. These walls are built slowly, often with materials you don't recognize as harmful. A single comment from someone years ago, "You're not good at that," becomes a cornerstone. A moment of embarrassment hardens into cement. Before you know it, you've fenced off whole parts of your life without ever meaning to. The hardest part is that these walls feel safe. They keep you from the risk of failure, the discomfort of being seen, the uncertainty of the unknown. But safety has a cost. Behind those walls there is less danger, but also less possibility. In school, the boundaries were meant to protect and organize. Out here, the walls you build without bricks can quietly shrink your life until you barely recognize its shape. To tear them down, you first have to notice them. This can be disorienting, realizing that a fact about yourself is actually just a long-held belief, that the door you thought was locked was only ever closed. Sometimes you don't even have to break the wall, you just have to step around it. And here's the paradox. The moment you start dismantling these walls, you'll feel exposed, vulnerable, as if the bricks, invisible though they were holding you together. But they weren't. They were holding you back. The walls you build without bricks will not disappear in one dramatic collapse. They will fall the way they rose, one piece at a time. A decision to speak up in a meeting, a willingness to take a class in something you've never tried, a choice to let someone see the real you without the polished edges. Sometimes, you'll discover that the wall wasn't built by you alone, that others helped lay it, with their judgments, their doubts, their need to keep you in a place they understood. You can't control the walls others build, but you can choose whether to live inside them. One day you may look back and see the space you once inhabited, a small, safe enclosure of your own making, and realize how far you've walked since then. The air will feel different, the horizon will be wider, and you'll know that while walls can be comforting, open space can be even more so. Because the truth is, the world will always try to build walls around you, but the most dangerous ones are the ones you build for yourself, without bricks, without mortar, without even realizing your own hands are doing the work. If you wait until you're ready, you'll wait forever. That's one of those truths no one tells you in school, where life is organized into neat progressions. Learn the lesson, take the test, move to the next level. The message is that you begin only after you've been prepared. Out here, the preparation rarely comes first. More often, the beginning itself is what makes you ready. Starting before you feel ready is uncomfortable. It feels like stepping into a room where everyone else seems to know the rules but you. It feels like wearing shoes 2 sizes too big, trying not to trip. You imagine there's some future version of you, more confident, more skilled, more certain, who should be the one doing this. But the only version you have is the one standing here now. The truth is, readiness is a moving target. No matter how much you learn, no matter how long you wait, there will always be something more you could know, some gap in your preparation. At some point, the question isn't, am I ready, but am I willing? Beginnings are rarely elegant. The first step is often awkward, clumsy, even embarrassing. You'll make mistakes, and you'll imagine that those mistakes define you. But starting before you're ready teaches you something school didn't. Mistakes are not the opposite of progress. They are progress. Think of anything you've ever learned to do: riding a bike, speaking a new language, cooking a meal. You didn't wait until you were flawless to try. You tried, failed, adjusted, tried again. Readiness grew from repetition, not from avoiding the start. The illusion of readiness is seductive because it feels like safety. If you can just gather a little more knowledge, a little more skill, maybe you can start without fear. But fear doesn't leave when you're ready. Fear leaves when you've moved far enough into the thing that it becomes familiar. In school, you were graded on how prepared you were to answer a question or perform a task. In life, there's no scorecard for readiness. The opportunities that change you the most will often arrive before you feel equipped to handle them. Sometimes, the best way to start when you're not ready is to shrink the first step until it feels possible. Write 1 sentence instead of a chapter. Run for 1 minute instead of a mile. Send the message instead of planning the conversation in your head for a month. Small beginnings are still beginnings. And here's the strange part. Once you start, you may realize that you knew more than you thought, that you were more capable than you believed. Or you may confirm that you truly weren't ready, but now you have first-hand knowledge, and that's worth more than endless preparation. One day, you'll look back at something you began before you felt ready and see that moment for what it was. Not reckless, but necessary. The only way to reach the point where you are ready is to begin when you're not. And maybe that's the real definition of courage. Not waiting until the fear is gone, but moving forward while it's still sitting heavily in your chest. Because if you're waiting for readiness, you're not waiting for a better moment. You're waiting for a moment that will never come. Walking away is often imagined as dramatic. A slammed door, a final word, a sudden turn of the back. But the kind of walking away that matters most is usually quiet, unannounced, and slow. It's not a sprint out of someone's life, or a leap from one chapter to the next. It's a gradual loosening of your grip, a step-by-step retreat from what no longer serves you. In school, endings were abrupt and obvious. The bell rang, the semester ended, the report card came. There was a clean line between then and now. Out here, the lines blur. You can drift away from a friendship without ever declaring it over. You can stop caring about something without admitting it to yourself for months. You can stay in a situation long after it has expired, simply because you don't know how to leave without burning everything down. The art of walking away slowly is about choosing preservation over destruction. It's about leaving in a way that doesn't require scorched earth. This is harder than the quick exit, because it demands patience. It means recognizing that some ties can be untangled without being severed. Walking away slowly allows you to see the landscape as you leave it. You notice the details you missed while you were inside it. The cracks in the foundation, the weight you didn't realize you were carrying. This perspective can soften the impulse for blame. When you leave gradually, you can appreciate what was good without denying what was harmful. The slow walk also gives you space to prepare for what comes next. Sudden departures can leave you disoriented, clinging to what you've lost simply because you didn't have time to imagine something different. A slow walk is deliberate. Each step away is also a step towards something else, even if you don't yet know what it is. In school, you might have been taught to stand your ground, or to cut ties as if those were the only 2 options. But there's a third: to move gently, to preserve dignity, yours and theirs, while still honoring your need to go. Sometimes, walking away slowly is an act of kindness toward the other person. Sometimes, it's an act of kindness toward yourself. It allows you to honor the investment you've made, even as you withdraw from it. It allows you to carry forward the lessons without carrying forward the weight. This isn't to say that every situation calls for a slow exit. There are moments when you must leave quickly. For safety, for sanity, for survival. But when urgency isn't required, slowness can be a gift. It can turn endings into transitions rather than ruptures. The art lies in resisting the pull of extremes, in neither clinging too tightly nor tearing away too fast. It's in knowing that you can leave a room without slamming the door, and that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to simply stop showing up in the same way you used to. One day you'll realize you've been walking away for a while, and that you're already somewhere else. The shift will be so gradual that you won't remember the exact step when the leaving became complete. You'll only know that you are lighter now, and that the distance between you and the thing you left has given you space to see it clearly. Because walking away slowly isn't about making a scene. It's about making a choice, and then honoring it, one small step at a time. Comfort feels safe. It feels warm, familiar, and deserved. After years of pushing, striving, and enduring, it's tempting to think you've earned the right to settle into it forever, and in small doses you have. But comfort is a tricky thing. It can soothe you, or it can slowly dull you. In school, comfort meant routine. The same seat, the same schedule, the same subjects, and within that routine, you could predict exactly what would happen next. It was a structure designed to remove uncertainty, but the real world doesn't operate on a bell schedule, and comfort outside of those walls comes with a hidden cost. It can keep you from moving forward at all. The danger isn't in enjoying comfort. It's in letting comfort become your default state, where the absence of discomfort becomes the primary goal of your days. Because discomfort, while unpleasant, is also where growth hides. Every skill you've learned, every meaningful change you've made, began with a moment of stretching beyond what was easy. A comfortable life rarely challenges you. It rarely asks for risk. It lulls you into believing that the way things are now is the way they should stay. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to avoid the unknown. Not because it's dangerous, but because it might disrupt the gentle rhythm you've built. The most dangerous thing about comfort is that it doesn't announce itself as a trap. It feels like the reward at the end of the work. It's only later, when years have passed, that you notice how small your world has become, how many chances you didn't take because they would have required you to feel uncertain again. This isn't to say you should reject comfort entirely. Rest is necessary. Pausing to catch your breath is not weakness. It's part of survival, but there's a difference between resting on a path and deciding to live on the side of the road forever. In school, you were pushed forward whether you felt ready or not. Every year, a new grade, a new set of challenges. Out here, no one forces you to keep moving. You have to create your own discomfort, to choose situations that stretch you, even when you'd rather stay in the safe zone. The danger of a comfortable life is that it often disguises itself as happiness, but they're not the same. Happiness has movement, curiosity, engagement. Comfort, left unchecked, has stagnation. You can be comfortable and quietly unhappy for years without realizing the cause. One day you may wake up and realize you've been living the same year on repeat, mistaking familiarity for fulfillment, and that realization will feel like both a loss and a call to action. The antidote to this danger isn't to throw yourself into chaos or abandon every routine. It's to deliberately invite small discomforts back into your life. Learn something that makes you feel incompetent again. Go somewhere you've never been and let yourself feel out of place. Start a project with no guarantee of success. These moments remind you that you're still capable of change, and that comfort should be a place you visit, not the place you live. Because the truth is, too much comfort doesn't just make life smaller, it makes you smaller, and the longer you stay in it, the harder it becomes to leave. Debt is often spoken of in numbers, balances, interest rates, payments due. Those are easy to track. They have statements, deadlines, and consequences that arrive in the mail. But there is another kind of debt, harder to measure, impossible to repay in full. It's the invisible debt we all carry. In school, debt was simple. You owed an assignment, you owed attention, you owed a certain number of days in your seat before summer. The exchanges were clear. Out here, the debts are not written down, but they shape your life all the same. This invisible debt comes from the people who made it possible for you to be where you are now. Not just parents or teachers, but strangers you'll never meet. Someone built the road you drive on. Someone planted the trees that give you shade. Someone fought battles or signed treaties long before you were born, shaping the world you inherited. It's also the debt of kindness you've been shown. The times someone gave you the benefit of the doubt. forgave a mistake, or helped you without expecting repayment. These moments accumulate, quietly, until you carry a weight you didn't know was there. And then there's the debt to the future, to the people who will live in the world you leave behind. Your choices today shape a landscape they will either thrive in or struggle against. This debt is the hardest to face, because the people you owe it to aren't here yet to remind you. The danger of invisible debt is that it's easy to ignore. No one will send you a bill for all the generosity you've received. No one will force you to consider the cost of your convenience to the next generation. But ignoring it doesn't erase it. It simply allows the weight to shift elsewhere, often onto people less able to carry it. In school, you learn to measure fairness in terms of even exchanges. I give you this, you give me that. But invisible debt isn't transactional. It's cumulative. You benefit from things you didn't earn, and you create costs others will have to pay. Carrying this debt well doesn't mean living in constant guilt. Guilt is paralyzing. It looks backward without moving forward. What matters is awareness. Seeing the network of unseen exchanges you're part of, and choosing to contribute more than you consume whenever you can. Sometimes, repaying invisible debt means paying it forward, offering someone else the break you once got, even if they can't give it back. Sometimes it means protecting something you'll never personally benefit from, because someone did the same for you long ago. And sometimes it's as simple as gratitude, not the shallow kind you say because it's polite, but the kind that changes how you live, the kind that makes you pause before taking more than you need, the kind that makes you notice the people whose efforts make your daily life possible. One day you'll realize that this debt can't be cleared, not because you've failed, but because it's woven into being human. You live in a web of giving and taking that stretches across time. Your role isn't to balance the books, but to keep the exchanges alive, to ensure that the net result of your being here is more given than taken. Because the truth is, you came into this life already owing, and you'll leave it still owing. What matters is what you do in the space between. Every life is a story, but most are never fully told, not because they aren't worth hearing, but because the person living them assumes someone else could tell it better. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect audience, the perfect confidence, and the story fades before it's ever spoken. In school, stories were assignments. You wrote them to fit a rubric, to satisfy a teacher, to get a grade. You learned to tailor them to what someone else wanted to hear, but the story only you can tell doesn't work that way. It isn't polished for approval. It isn't written to match a template. It's messy, contradictory, and alive in ways that can't be reduced to bullet points. This story is shaped by the things only you have seen, the small details only you have noticed, the quiet moments that meant nothing to anyone else but altered you entirely. It's built from your failures as much as your victories, from the people who left you as much as the ones who stayed. The danger is thinking your story doesn't matter, because it feels ordinary to you. But what's ordinary to you is foreign to someone else. The hallway you walked every day without thinking could be the exact hallway someone else has been searching to picture. The choices you barely noticed making might be the ones someone else needs to witness in order to make their own. The story only you can tell isn't always a grand narrative. Sometimes it's a single image, a single moment, carried forward in words so that someone else can see it. And sometimes, it isn't told with words at all. It's expressed in the way you move through the world, the way you treat people, the way you refuse to repeat a harm you've experienced. In school, you were taught to tell the story that would be graded well. Out here, the story that matters is the one that is true, not in the sense of factual accuracy, but in the sense of emotional honesty. It's the story that feels risky to share because it reveals the parts of you that don't fit neatly into other people's expectations. The hardest part about telling your own story is that it forces you to take ownership of it. You can't hide behind someone else's version of events. You can't soften the edges to make yourself more likable without losing something important. You have to decide whether you value being understood more than being approved of. The story only you can tell is also the story only you can withhold. No one can force it from you. If you choose to keep it, it will die with you. And maybe that's fine. Not every story is meant to be shared. But ask yourself if the silence is protecting you, or if it's simply protecting your fear. Sometimes, sharing your story changes nothing in the outer world. No applause, no transformation, no sudden recognition. But it can still shift something inside you. It can remind you that your life is not just something that happened to you, but something you've shaped and survived and witnessed. One day, someone may tell you that your story is exactly what they needed to hear. You may never have imagined it would matter to them. And that's the point. You can't predict where your words will land or who will carry them forward. Because the truth is, your story is not just yours. It is stitched into the fabric of other people's stories, past and future. You hold a thread no one else can offer, and what you do with it will ripple far beyond what you'll ever see. Every beginning contains its ending, though we rarely notice it. In school, you were handed projects with clear deadlines, books with the final page already printed, lessons with tests scheduled in advance. You knew when and how things would conclude. Life beyond those walls isn't so neatly packaged. Most of the time you step into something without any certainty about where or when it will end, and that's what makes seeing the ending from the start both rare and valuable. To see an ending early is not to be pessimistic. It's to be aware. It's understanding that every friendship, every job, every season of your life has an expiration date, even if you can't see the exact moment it will arrive. It's holding the truth that endings are not failures, but natural conclusions, and that anticipating them allows you to move through beginnings with a different kind of presence. When you start something without imagining its ending, you risk drifting. You treat the time as if it's endless, squandering moments under the assumption there will always be more. But when you can feel the ending, even faintly, you treat each moment as part of a finite arc. You stop thinking forever and start thinking for now. The skill isn't in predicting the exact details. You don't need to know the final scene. You just need to accept that there will be one. That acceptance changes how you invest yourself. It makes you ask, if this were to end tomorrow, what would I want to have said? What would I want to have done? What would I regret leaving undone? Seeing the ending from the start doesn't mean you become detached. It means you stop clinging. You can give yourself fully without gripping so tightly that you can't let go when the time comes. You stop measuring value in how long something lasts, and instead measure it in the depth of what happens while it does. In school, you learn to prepare for endings in tidy ways. Study for the final exam, finish the group project, write the closing paragraph. Out here, the preparation is less about tasks and more about the way you move through the in-between. It's about knowing that relationships will change, jobs will end, seasons will shift, and building your life so that you can meet those endings without breaking. Some endings arrive gently, almost invisibly. Others crash in like a wave. If you've been willing to imagine them from the beginning, you may not avoid the pain, but you'll avoid the shock. You'll recognize the signs not as betrayals, but as the natural unfolding of the arc you stepped into. The danger of ignoring endings is that they have a way of deciding for you. If you refuse to see them, they'll still arrive, but they'll catch you off guard, leaving you scrambling, unprepared. Seeing them from the start is not about control, but about readiness. Sometimes, the act of imagining the ending will change the way you begin. You might choose more carefully, knowing that your time, attention, and energy are finite. You might invest more fully, aware that the window is short. You might walk away sooner, recognizing that some stories aren't worth writing all the way to the last page. One day, you'll look back and realize that the beginnings where you could see the endings were the ones you lived most honestly. You didn't waste time pretending they would last forever. You loved, worked, created, and explored as if the closing chapter was already written, and in a way it was. Because the truth is, the moment you step into anything, you are also stepping toward its end. The wisdom lies not in denying it, but in letting that knowledge make every moment in between count. We live in a world that celebrates movement, promotions, relocations, constant upgrades, endless scrolling. The next thing is always the prize. In school, staying still usually meant falling behind. You were told to keep moving forward, to always aim for the next milestone. But life outside those walls is more complex. Sometimes progress looks like staying exactly where you are, and that requires a kind of courage most people never learn. Staying still isn't about laziness or fear. It's about knowing when movement would be an escape, not an evolution. It's about resisting the urge to change for the sake of change, to avoid the discomfort of sitting with uncertainty, grief, or dissatisfaction. The courage to stay still begins with listening, not to the noise around you, but to the quiet voice within that says, "Not yet." This is the voice that knows growth is happening underground, out of sight, in ways that will only be visible later. It's the same patience nature shows when seeds lie dormant through winter, preparing for a spring they cannot rush. In school, every year was a reset. New classes, new teachers, new schedules. You got used to change as something automatic, something external. But in the rest of life, change is often self-imposed. You can force it before you're ready. mistaking action for progress. And when you do, you risk uprooting something before it has a chance to take hold. Staying still can be uncomfortable, because it feels like inaction. You see others moving, starting businesses, traveling the world, overhauling their lives, and you wonder if you're wasting your time. The world rewards visible productivity, not invisible preparation. But stillness is its own kind of work. It's the work of clarity, of allowing the next step to emerge fully formed, instead of dragging it out half-grown. The danger of constant motion is that you can spend years moving without ever arriving anywhere meaningful. You can cross oceans only to realize you've been running from yourself. Staying still removes that escape. It forces you to face the questions movement can distract you from. Who am I when I'm not chasing something? What do I actually want, beyond the momentum? There's a strength in holding your ground while the world pressures you to shift. It's a refusal to be swept along by currents that don't belong to you. It's trusting that your timeline doesn't have to match anyone else's. Of course, there's a difference between intentional stillness and stagnation. Stillness has awareness. You know you're choosing it, and you're using the time to observe, reflect, and prepare. Stagnation is unconscious. It's staying still because you're afraid to move at all. The courage to stay still comes from knowing you could act, but choosing not to, because right now the wisest move is to wait. One day you'll see the outcome of a time you chose stillness. The decision you didn't rush will fit perfectly when it arrives. The path you didn't take will reveal itself as the wrong one. The storm you waited out will have passed, leaving clearer skies, and you'll understand that sometimes, stillness isn't the absence of courage, it's the purest form of it. Because the truth is, movement is easy when the path is clear. Staying still when it isn't takes a kind of bravery that will never make headlines, but will quietly shape the life you're building. In school, measurements were simple. Numbers told you how well you were doing, test scores, grades, attendance records. Success was a percentage, a rank, a neat little box you could point to and say, this is proof I'm doing well. But the world outside the classroom doesn't hand out report cards, and the question of how to measure a good life is one you must answer without anyone giving you the scale. The danger is in borrowing someone else's ruler. You look at the lives around you, the houses, the careers, the vacations, and assume their measurements apply to you. But a ruler designed for someone else will always make you feel either too small or too large in the wrong ways. A good life isn't measured in the number of things you own, or the milestones you've ticked off. It's measured in the quality of your relationships, the depth of your experiences, the alignment between your choices and your values. But those aren't things you can tally in a spreadsheet. They're lived in moments that slip past quietly, the conversation that made you feel truly seen, the decision you made that kept you aligned with yourself, even when it cost you something, the evening you felt at peace for no reason at all. If you only measure your life in visible achievements, you'll miss the hidden victories, the times you showed restraint instead of retaliation, the days you chose kindness over convenience, the nights you stayed up to help someone who would never repay you. Those moments may not look impressive from the outside, but they build the foundation of a life you can live inside without regret. In school, you were graded on what could be seen and scored. Out here, the most important measures are often invisible. They're about how you make people feel, how you navigate your own mind, how you respond when no one is watching. The trouble is, invisible measures require honesty. You can't fake them for long, because you're the one keeping the score, and you can't distract yourself with the appearance of success if you know deep down that your internal ledger is unbalanced. Measuring a good life also means understanding that the scale changes over time. What matters to you at 20 will not be what matters at 50. A good life isn't a fixed destination. It's a shifting horizon, always moving as you grow. The question isn't whether you're keeping up with others. It's whether you're keeping pace with the person you're becoming. Sometimes the measure is as simple as asking yourself, if nothing about my circumstances changed tomorrow, could I still find reasons to be content, not complacent? Content. If the answer is yes, you're closer to a good life than most. Other times, it's looking at the gap between your values and your actions. The smaller the gap, the better the life. You may not have everything you want, but if you're living in a way that feels aligned, you've already surpassed the emptiest kind of success, the kind that looks good but feels hollow. One day, someone will try to sum up your life in a sentence. They won't list your possessions or recite your resume. They'll talk about how you made them feel, the effect you had on the world around you, the way you lived when there was no reward for doing the right thing. That's the real measure, and you get to set it long before they do. Because the truth is, A good life can't be measured in a single way. It's not a number, not a trophy, not a rank. It's a balance of meaning, integrity, love, and peace. And the courage to live by your own scale, even when the world is shouting measurements that don't belong to you. There are moments that vanish the instant they happen, slipping into the blur of days you'll never fully recall. And then there are the others. The ones that refuse to fade, no matter how many years or miles you put between yourself and them. They live inside you, unchanged, waiting to be replayed in perfect detail. In school, you learnt about history as a sequence of events, dates, facts, names, but the history you carry in your own life doesn't follow a neat timeline. It's scattered, non-linear. The moments that stay are not always the big ones. Often, they're small, almost invisible at the time. A glance, a sound, the smell of rain in a certain season. They stay because they touched something deeper than your conscious memory. The moments that refuse to fade don't always make sense. Some are joyful, a laugh so hard your ribs ached, a sunrise that made you feel like the only person alive, the unexpected kindness of a stranger who will never know what it meant. Others are heavy, the silence after bad news, the way a door closed for the last time, the look in someone's eyes when they realized you were leaving. You can't choose which moments stay, they choose you, and they don't always arrive in the order you expect. You may forget the entire year a milestone happened, but remember the exact sound of your own footsteps walking away from it. You may forget the details of a conversation, but remember the exact way your chest tightened when a single sentence was spoken. In school, memory was about accuracy, being able to recall facts on demand. Out here, memory is about meaning. The moments you keep are not the ones you rehearsed, but the ones that shaped you without asking permission. Sometimes, these moments are comforting. They're touchstones you return to when life feels unsteady, reminders of who you were and what you've survived. Other times they're burdens, looping endlessly, asking to be resolved when there's no resolution left to find. The danger is thinking you must erase the painful ones to move forward, but often those are the very moments that anchor your sense of self. They remind you of what matters, what you will never tolerate again, what you are capable of enduring. The moments that refuse to fade are also teachers. They tell you what cuts through your distractions, what pierces the noise. They are proof that life isn't measured only in years, but in these flashes of intensity that alter the shape of your inner world. You can try to recreate them, revisiting the place, the person, the feeling, but they rarely come back in the same form. That's not their job. Their job is to remain as they were, unchanged, so that you can see how you've changed around them. One day you may realize that your life is not a collection of days, but a constellation of these moments, connected by invisible lines only you can see. And the beauty is that they are yours alone. No one else will carry them exactly as you do. Because the truth is, the moments that refuse to fade are not just memories, they are living fragments of who you are. Proof that some parts of you will always remain untouched by time. In school, you were taught to avoid mistakes. The wrong answer meant red ink. A broken object was to be replaced, not admired. Cracks were flaws, and flaws were failures. Perfection was the goal, but outside of those walls, life quickly teaches you that everything breaks, and that sometimes, the breaking is the most beautiful part. There's a kind of honesty in something that's been broken. It no longer pretends to be untouched. The wear, the fractures, the missing pieces. They tell a story that perfection never could. A flawless surface hides its history. A broken one wears it openly. In Japan there is an art called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, so the cracks become part of the design. The idea is not to disguise the break, but to highlight it, making the object more beautiful for having been damaged. Life works the same way. The places where you've been cracked open are not things to hide. They're the places where your light gets in and out. When something in you breaks, a belief, a relationship, a plan you thought was unshakable, the instinct is to repair it invisibly, to restore it to what it was. But often, the old shape no longer fits. The break changes the structure, and if you allow it, it can change you into something stronger, stranger, and more authentic than you were before. In school, you learned to fear failure as the opposite of success. Out here, failure is simply a point on the path, and often the point where the path opens into something you couldn't have seen otherwise. The beauty in what breaks is that it frees you from the illusion of control. You realize that no matter how carefully you plan, things will shatter, and when they do, you have a choice. Pretend it never happened, or rebuild in a way that honors the break. Some breaks are quiet. The moment you realize you no longer believe in something you've built your life around. Others are violent. The sudden loss, the betrayal, the collapse. Both kinds leave you standing among pieces, deciding which to keep and which to leave behind. The pieces you choose to keep will define the shape of your future. Sometimes, you'll find beauty in unexpected fragments, a lesson you didn't know you'd learned, a strength you didn't know you had, a softness you didn't know you could carry. The world tells you to move on quickly, to replace what's broken with something new, but beauty takes time to emerge from the break. You have to live with the cracks for a while. Let the edges soften, learn the contours of this new shape you've become. One day, you'll run your fingers along a scar, physical or otherwise, and feel gratitude instead of grief. You'll understand that without the break, you would have stayed the same, mistaking safety for life. Because the truth is, everything that matters will break you at least once. Love, loss, trust, hope. But if you let them, the breaks will not leave you empty. They will leave you gold-lined, one of a kind, and more whole than you ever were unbroken. In school, life came with a script. The schedule told you where to be, what to study, when to speak, when to stop. Even your future seemed pre-written. Graduate, get a job, follow the steps laid out by someone else. There was comfort in that structure, even if it sometimes felt suffocating. Out in the real world, the script dissolves, and suddenly, you're standing on stage with no lines, no director, no one to tell you what comes next. Living without a script sounds liberating. And it can be. You are free to improvise, to follow your curiosity, to break the rules you never agreed to in the first place. But it's also terrifying. A script protects you from uncertainty. Without it, every decision is yours alone. There's no teacher to tell you if you're on the right track. No grade to confirm you're doing well. The truth is, most people cling to some kind of script. Even outside of school, they follow societal timelines. Career by this age, marriage by that age, children, retirement. They borrow lines from the scripts of those around them, hoping the same story will fit their life. But your script is yours to write, and if you don't, someone else will hand you theirs. Living without a script means tolerating the blank page. It means making peace with not knowing what's next, and trusting that you can create meaning as you go. It requires listening more to your own instincts than to the chorus of voices telling you what should happen next. In school, improvisation was risky. Without the right answer, you could fail. Out here, there is no single right answer, only the one you choose and commit to. The challenge is that you must create your own criteria for success. Is it money, freedom, love, contribution? Only you can decide. The danger of living without a script is that you can drift, letting the absence of structure turn into the absence of direction. The beauty of it is that you can also discover paths that no script could have shown you. You can build a life that doesn't make sense to anyone but you, and that's exactly what makes it yours. You will make mistakes. You will forget your own lines. You will find yourself in scenes you didn't plan for, with people you didn't expect, and you will realize that this is the point. A life without a script isn't about perfect execution. It's about presence. You are here, now, responding to what's in front of you instead of clinging to what was written before. Some days you'll long for the comfort of the old script, but if you return to it, you'll notice how small it feels now, how it no longer fits the person you've become. You'll see that living without a script doesn't mean chaos. It means authorship. One day you'll look back at the life you've lived and realize it wasn't the absence of a script that made it meaningful. It was the way you showed up to the unwritten parts. The courage to step into them without knowing the ending, trusting yourself to keep creating until the curtain falls. In school, lessons came in order. First the basics, then the advanced. You learned multiplication before algebra, reading before literature. The idea was that life too would teach you in a sequence, that you'd gain the wisdom you needed in time to use it, but life doesn't work that way. Some of its most important truths only reveal themselves at the very end, when you can no longer go back and live differently. The last lesson you learned too late is that most of what you worried about didn't matter. The deadlines, the petty arguments, the ways you tried to impress people who barely noticed you, all of it fades into irrelevance when held up against the things you truly wish you'd spent more time on. You realize that the moments you rushed through were the ones you should have lingered in, that the people you assumed would always be there were temporary, that the version of yourself you postponed, the one who wanted to create, explore, rest, love freely, never got the time you thought you'd give them later. The last lesson is that later is a dangerous illusion. You think you have more time, more chances, more energy to do the things you dream about once you've checked off all the responsible boxes. But the truth is, the boxes never end, and one day, you run out of time before you run out of lists. In school, success was about preparation, getting ready for the next stage. In life, you can spend decades preparing and never actually arrive. The last lesson is that you were already in the middle of it. Life wasn't the thing you were working toward. It was the thing happening while you were making plans. This lesson often arrives quietly. You might be looking at an old photograph and feel a sudden ache, not just for the people in it, but for the way you were back then. How unaware you were that it was already good. How certain you were that the best was still ahead, when in reality you were already living some of it without realizing. The danger of this lesson coming late is regret. Not for the things you did, but for the ones you kept putting off. The conversations you never had. The risks you never took. The days you traded for a future that never quite looked the way you imagined. But there is also a strange kindness in learning it at all, even at the end, because once you see it, you can pass it on. You can tell someone younger, someone rushing, someone convinced they're still just getting ready that this, today, now, is the stage they've been waiting for. The last lesson you learn too late is simple. Life is not in the big achievements, the someday goals, or the perfect moments you've been saving for. It's in the ordinary days, the unremarkable afternoons, the small exchanges that seem forgettable until you realize they're what you miss most. And if you're lucky enough to realize it before your own curtain falls, you might start living as if every day is the main event, because it is. By now, you've traveled through 50 fragments of wisdom, not the kind printed in textbooks or underlined on exams, but the kind life whispers when no one else is listening. You've seen that the most important lessons are rarely announced. They hide in quiet moments, in mistakes you thought you couldn't survive, in conversations you almost didn't have. You began this journey thinking you were gathering advice, tools to carry into the future, but somewhere along the way you realized the future was already here. That each section wasn't just a thought experiment or an abstract truth. It was a mirror, angled differently each time, showing you pieces of a life you've already been living. The irony is that life teaches backwards. You only understand the first lessons after you've lived long enough to see their shape in hindsight. The patience you once thought was wasted. Time becomes the reason you endured. The losses you wished you could erase become the ones that shaped you most deeply. The detours you cursed become the bridges you didn't know you were building. In school, learning was linear. Lesson 1, then lesson 2. Here, learning loops. You return to the same truths over and over, each time seeing them from a slightly different height, a slightly different distance. Wisdom doesn't arrive all at once. It grows like rings in a tree, invisible until you pause and trace them. You've walked with the compass without a map, and learned to move without certainty. You've stood before the mirror that shows more than you, and faced truths you didn't expect. You've carried storms, planted trees you'll never sit under, measured a good life without numbers, and seen the beauty in what breaks. And if you've been paying attention, you've noticed something else. The lessons are not separate, they speak to one another. The patience that outlives time is the same patience that lets you live without a script. The courage to stay still is woven into the art of walking away slowly. The beauty in what breaks is inseparable from the risk of never risking. Every idea folds into another, until you realize you've been walking in a circle. Not the kind of circle that traps you, the kind that deepens. Each step through these ideas brought you back to the same center, that the life you want is not waiting for you somewhere else. It's here, in the conversations you choose to have, in the risks you decide to take, in the battles you let pass without joining. The last lesson, the one you may be tempted to skip, is that wisdom itself is useless if it stays in your head. You have to live it. And living it means failing at it, over and over. You will still forget. You will still rush through moments you should linger in. You will still believe, from time to time, that the next thing will finally make you whole. But maybe that's the point. Maybe wisdom isn't about perfect application. Maybe it's about remembering a little sooner each time, catching yourself in the middle of a familiar mistake, and choosing differently, even once. You won't graduate from this. There is no diploma for paying attention to your own life, but there is something better. The quiet knowledge that you are awake in it, that you are no longer waiting for the real part to start, that you see the value in things no one taught you to measure. One day, someone will ask you what you've learned. You'll think of these lessons, not as a list, but as a set of shapes pressed into your days. You might tell them about the compass that works without a map, or the tree planted for someone else's shade, or the moment you realized you could walk away without slamming the door. And if they're listening closely, they'll hear the truth beneath your words, that the wisdom worth having is not a collection of answers, but a way of moving through the world, a way of noticing, a way of staying when you could run, of leaving when you could stay, of beginning when you don't feel ready. You'll see it then, as you might see it now. You've been walking the same circle all along, and every step has been teaching you the same thing in different languages. Life was never trying to hand you a perfect script. It was handing you fragments, and trusting you to make something worth living from them. And if you carry nothing else from here, carry this. The last lesson you learned too late is not that life is short, it's that it was happening the whole time, and you were already in it.